And in my world, I do the equivalent of solving digital cancer. That data is able to uniquely identify you. Your phones, your data knows more about you than you know about yourself. This country, there is no data privacy. There's a reason why you have targeted advertising.
Companies are listening. How does that become money?
Your data equals money. If it wasn't valuable, they wouldn't be grabbing the data, and nothing's free. You are the target.
I have my device here. When we talk the they, who's the they? The person who makes the phone? Is it every app that's installed on the phone? Who is this?
That could be Google. That could be Apple. Apple talks about privacy. They have access to your data if they want to utilize that data. I got into the Secret Service because I had someone close to me that I lost, and we didn't know who killed him. He was murdered.
This was your friend, right? Louis?
Louis Balancio, yeah. I get a phone call from one of my friends, and they said, Louis dead. So
I started in the U.S. Secret Service. I believe you were on already.
April of 2000.
So you were a couple of months before me. I was July of 2000.
What was your class number?
That I don't remember. Maybe 201. Does that sound right?
Okay, I was 192.
Yeah, they had a big hiring push that year. You were the guy that everybody went to for anything tech, gadget, fix it, broke it, anything that nobody understood. Everybody went to you. And I remember going to you for every case I had that had like a technical component or online component. Because at that time, that stuff was just starting out. And you were like the brains. It was always interesting. And like you'd start talking and you would start losing me. You probably used to lose a lot of us. We're like, Matt, bring it back to English.
I was also the guy who picked up the brochure at that time and everything was printed. And they showed U.S. Secret Service agents next to the limousine. And as soon as they saw that I understood the bits and the bytes, they said, come here, we have other work for you. And that's where a lot of the tech work came in, which is great. But it was literally like doing double duty because it was nonstop on the technical side as well as on the protection side.
So can I ask you a question? I remember there was something called an electronic crime squad, and that was a new thing. Was the service the first place to start doing that? Like who started investigating electronic crimes first? And when I say electronic, like break down what that was.
Sure. It was the New York Electronic Crimes Task Force. Everyone now knows that there's data breaches, there's cyber impacts. We talk about killware. There's a lot of stuff that goes on today that people take for granted. But at that time, it really didn't exist. It was really in its infancy. And at that time, you had people counterfeiting chips. Let's say a Pentium processor that should be at X amount of gigahertz. They would dumb it down to a lower and they would make money because it was basically counterfeit chips.
Who would they sell that to?
Public, online. They would also do calling card fraud, traditional skimming of credit cards or debit cards. But there was also calling card fraud. So there used to actually be plastic cards with similar to a credit card. If you wanted to make a phone call that you would take out let's say your AT&T card, it would have a number on it. You go on the payphone, dial the calling card number, and then you'd be able to make a call. So what the fraudsters would do on 50th and Broadway and in Penn Station is they would do what's called shoulder surfing, which they'd be a few phone booths over, pretend like they're on the phone, or they may actually be on the phone, and they'd be able to read the digits off of the card or how you punch the numbers into the phone. That was actually one of my first cases that I got. When I got out of training, I remember it was myself, Leventis, and we love calling each other. Everyone calls each other by their last name. And I believe the last name was Angela Hall. And I remember our desks we're just like looking at each other at the train, like, what the hell do we do? Like, we're just looking at each other. And then one of the female bosses comes out. She would just, what are you guys doing? You guys are just looking at each other. Go do something. And then Bob Weaver calls me in. And he was head of e-crimes at that time. And he says, hey, I'm not going to dime out this agent, but he says, so-and-so is working this case. It's AT&T calling card fraud. I'm just letting you know that, Ferrante, you're not going to solve this. He'll show you the ropes. It's never going to get solved because if you get them, you're going to only get them for maybe $3,000 to $5,000 of fraud on a single card. And this has been going on forever. Just let him show you the ropes. And that really bothered me. Because we solve problems. We get handed problems, whether it's the physical world or the digital world. And in my world, I do the equivalent of solving the equivalent of digital cancer. And when I heard that, it just irked me. And eventually the fraud just kept going up, and this agent wasn't doing anything. A lot of the fraud was taking place in Penn Station and 50th and Broadway. They would steal the numbers, exchange it, and the fraud numbers just kept going up, millions and millions of dollars. And he started getting heat, like, hey, this is part of the task force. We're here to help companies out. And I said, yeah, but so-and-so's supposed to show me the ropes, do something about it. I'm like, all right. So I try and get an agent. And at that time, I don't know what the rule is now, you needed at least another person to do surveillance. You're not really supposed to do surveillance.
You're not supposed to do surveillance by yourself because it's dangerous, because something happens, you're on your own. I mean, that's what I assume.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're spot on.
Although I know some people that did do surveillance by themselves. I may have done it by myself.
So
I've driven by a few places.
Absolutely. So the service had, their undercover vehicles. One was a van, and it was very hard because these teams, the criminals, are actually running counter surveillance, trying to burn any type of surveillance that they would have on them. I went the night before around 50th and Broadway, parked the van there, slept in the van, woke up, and then just ran surveillance by myself because I couldn't get anyone to work, to work with me. Ran the surveillance. I ID'd the individuals doing it. It was just fascinating to me, like, well, why are they doing this, and how do we get the individuals on this, not just for the fraud that they're doing on that card, but maybe even for the history of the calls that they're doing. So I worked with AT&T, and I applied forensic methodologies to identify how people, based on their calling patterns, their numbers, uniquely identify them in the network. And instead of getting them for the 5,000, I got them from many, many millions of dollars in fraud because of the history of the fraud. And I was able to tie that together using digital forensics, also surveillance. And I proved to the court, here's this individual. He's in Penn Station. Now he's in Chicago. Now he's in this location here.
Matt, the pattern that you say that you identified, what pattern is that? Like, what does that look like? I mean, what's a pattern look like when it comes to history of calling?
It's digitized at that point. When it's going through AT&T system, or your phone, for example, your modern phone is an extension of you. Your data is an extension of you. Your data can uniquely identify you. Similar to a fingerprint, where there's uniqueness in your fingerprint, or your eye, there's uniqueness in your eye. Your data is unique to you. On average, we produce, and I went to MIT, and one of my projects was on digital identities, digital legacies. On average, we produce about 1.2 terabytes on an annual basis. Over our lifetime, we will produce 5.5 petabytes of data. People throw out these numbers. Well, what's 5.5 petabytes of data that you can produce over your lifetime? Well, let's say you've printed that out, 5.5 petabytes of data. That would wrap around the earth 7 times in paper, the data to paper equivalency. That's how much we produce. But that data is able to uniquely identify you, where you've been, pretty much what you're thinking, what you may do. Your phones, your data knows more about you than you know about yourself.
So what does it know about me?
Everything. How much you work out, what you might have a smartwatch. I'm wearing one now. What your blood pressure is, who you call, what you like searching on the internet. There's pretty much any possible thing that you could think about. There's a reason why you have targeted advertising. There was a time, I have 2 kids. My kids, when they were looking for colleges, even before we even started looking for college, we were just talking about colleges. All of a sudden it starts popping up on my wife's phone, different colleges.
How does that happen? That happens to me all the time.
Well, your phones have mics, your phones have cameras, the Alexa devices, I have them in my house. The mics are unbelievable. The mics are unreal. I am taken back at how powerful the mics are and how they'll pick up your voice from far across the room. They must be picking up. So this country, there is no data privacy. And I don't know if you're aware of where data privacy actually came from. In Europe,
No.
I worked in Europe for a few years, and they don't call it data privacy, they call it data privacy. That's the way they would say it. But it emanated from the Cold War. And that's why data privacy is strong in Europe, because they needed a mechanism to make sure that information or sensitive information didn't go across borders. In this country, there really is no data privacy. The data is being taken. And then, it's just being taken by the corporations. And I even knew way back in 2000, I think there was a lot of people jumping up and down. They're saying government, they're involved in everyone's data. And even back then I said, I think the real concern that we should be having is the corporations. because they're not respecting the data privacy. And most of the time when you get a legal agreement before you install an app, I've worked as an expert on class action lawsuits, both defending companies and also on the other side, data privacy issues. The lawyers get involved, but the reality is are things changing? Are they changing for the better? Whether it's cybersecurity or data privacy assurance, one of the things that we learned, and I think in the service that we take for granted, is accountability and responsibility. And you don't see that these days. It's always someone else's fault. Or if, a company made hypothetically $4 billion and they're fined $1 billion, well, they just made $3 billion in profit. So where are they? How are they really addressing the problem? Are they really fixing the problem?
Let me ask
and
you
the problem's
a
only
question.
going to get worse.
Companies are listening. What do they want? What are they collecting? And how does that become money? What are they doing to the average person? I know we're jumping ahead here, but what's happening here?
Data is the new currency. Data, those who control the data, it's probably even more powerful than the dollar, for example. And you might say, well, how do they monetize that data? Well, what are you going to purchase? Could you be influenced to purchase certain things? Could you be influenced in certain ways on how you vote, in terms of where you go? That's how they're able to monetize the data. So it could be targeted advertisement, but it can be a lot more in terms of influencing you on decision making and influencing your kids as well.
Can you give me an example of how somebody could influence you to make a decision that you normally would not have made through data?
I was looking up, even before I started looking up different schools for professional education, I started getting advertisements for other schools, never searched for anything. Neither did my wife, neither did anyone else. And I started getting advertisements for other schools to go for advanced education or for my master's. That's an example where, if I'm looking at MIT as a school and I start getting advertisements for another school, well, they've captured that and they're able to influence me to potentially make a purchase or make a decision other than the school that I was initially looking for. And they're doing the same thing with products and services. Bottom line is your data equals money. Your data is valuable. If it wasn't valuable, they wouldn't be grabbing the data. And the old saying's true, nothing's free. So if they're not selling you something, you're not taking money out of your pocket, you are the target. You are the one. Your data, they'll monetize your data and use it for they'll resell it to other people who want to buy that data. And there are data brokers who deal with just that, data brokering with your data.
All right. So I have my device here. When we talk who's the they? Is it the person who makes the phone? Is it every app that's installed on the phone? Who is this?
So there's a big thing about competitors trying to control your data. So when you're holding up the device, I look at that and you have a physical device. You actually have the phone itself, which is made of hardware. So hardware used to be cheap, the physical components that make up that device. It used to be where that used to be expensive. The reason why phones, maybe not the iPhones, the reason why other phones have gotten cheap is because they are taking your information and they're often reselling your information. So who is that? Well, that could be Google. That could be Apple. Apple talks about privacy, but they have access to your data if they want to utilize that data. Even if you want to get your data sometimes from these different devices, it's extremely, extremely hard to even get iMessages off that's used for civil or criminal cases. And in some cases, they're not giving the data to law enforcement, even with active search warrants.
I've heard that, actually. I've heard that where police will investigate something and they'll go to an Apple and say, could you give us the text messages? I've heard that entities will turn around and say no.
Correct. They don't want to give the data up. The intelligence agencies can pretty much get to your data. Law enforcement is having definitely challenges with getting to the data. Pretty much what they're doing is having to hack the phones to get that. And it's a battle between, especially in Apple's a good example, between Apple and law enforcement in terms of getting the data. And some of the software just to get simple messages off of a phone costs $50,000 to $60,000. Extremely expensive.
Some people may be listening to this and be like, yeah, I don't want police to get a hold of my data from Apple. Good. I'm glad Apple's doing it. Well, what's the flip side of that?
There needs to be respect for privacy. If you violate someone's privacy, and you knew this, if you did a wiretap, a typical wiretap on a criminal and you didn't have a court order to do that, there needs to be real penalties for violation of doing an illegal wiretap. That's how you enforce accountability. But with that said, I've had on the civil side, I had phones shattered in pieces in a car accident. The family member died. They were being sued, the family, by the other party who was involved in the car accident. The other driver survived. They needed the data off of the phone.
Why?
One, you have family photos on the phone that were unique and just, on the phone itself. You also have other information on the phone. Well, what was that person doing? How fast were they going to that time? There's other devices. I can even tell how fast you're going, whether you were streaming something during that time. We had a phone that was shattered, literally shattered into pieces. Put that phone together and we were able to bypass the encryption chip and get the data off of at a chip level, literally at a chip level, at a circuit board level, and get that 100% data recovery off of that phone. And it works both ways. So we got the other girl's phone as well. And it turned out what she was doing, and as part of the accident, she was streaming video while she was driving. The family was...
The woman who was actually trying to sue the other family.
Correct.
And she was the one streaming.
She was on her fault. So, dead people really can't talk, but their devices do. So the family was elated. One, they were able to resolve the issue and show proof. Other person had a level of accountability for the accident that they were able to get, that he was not streaming videos or other distractions while he was driving. And they were also elated that we're able to get family photos off of the device that they didn't have in any other place. I mean, I looked at, for example, my family photos, and I'm a little smarter in how to collect it. Realized actually this week, over 47,000 photos. You don't realize how many photos, how many unique photos that are going to get lost. What happens to your data, anyone's data, when they die?
I don't know.
Who owns that? It's all over the place. It's not like it used to be where everything's on my phone. No, it's scattered all over. Part of it might be on Amazon. Part of it might be on Apple. It's all over. Even with assets, there's cryptocurrency that we're identifying today. So when people pass, we have families come to us and say, hey, we have no idea where the data is. We have no idea where the accounts are. We identify financial accounts. The family had no idea that existed. Crypto accounts, they didn't know existed. Photos, videos. My take is that's owned by the individual and it's owned by the family. It's a way to enforce data privacy rights. It's not owned by the Amazons, the Apples, the Microsoft. It should be owned by the family.
But those companies do own your data.
Do they? No, I don't think they do. They shouldn't own your data. They might be parked there, but it shouldn't be their data. It should be owned by the individual.
Is there a law that says, no, that's not your data? Like, is that where this is all ambiguous now?
It depends. It depends. With a click of a mouse, your data is going cross borders. Your data is going different locations. There's data privacy that goes by state as well. So where's your data actually reside?
Everywhere.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's a mess right now.
So if my data is everywhere, I guess, how am I susceptible? Why is this a problem? Some people are like,
It's until you really need the data. You can manipulate data. Your historical information, everything about, I said data uniquely identifies you. There's a history of your data that can go back for a long period of time. As generation to generation passes, that data is going to be more and more valuable because that data is just going to grow. We've had, and this is an extreme case, I've had 3 separate cases where somebody maliciously tried to insert child pornography into another person's computer, and you ruin a person's life. You're destroyed. Misinformation or bad information travels a lot faster than the truth. That's what I've seen. So I get called in a lot of times to testify about the authenticity of data, the integrity of data, who owns data, different rights of data. And some of those battles come in, including in divorce cases. But if you discard a device, let's say your old phone, you throw it in the trash can, who owns that data at that point if someone else grabs that? You remember dumpster diving, right? Where people used to go in the dumpsters and...
They used to literally, yes, it was like they just open up your trash, go through it, pull out your receipts, pull out all your stuff, and see whatever they could find out about you and use that.
Correct. So government has different restrictions on what they can grab. But if I was a criminal and I'm walking with one of my electronic devices, let's just say a flash drive, USB flash drive.
Okay.
And I take it and I throw it in the trash can. Walk right now into Manhattan, I throw it in the trash can. Can I say that's still my data, or did I discard it?
I would think it's not your data anymore.
Correct.
Because it's trash. It's public.
Correct. So in a divorce case, a lot of time, let's say the husband or the wife leaves the house, they leave behind their electronic devices.
The spouse throws their stuff out, or they take their
They
stuff.
may discard, and then that usually becomes
What do you do for divorce cases?
those are interesting. Those are fun because you have a lot of emotions flying.
Probably a lot of pissed people, angry. I have a friend who's a divorce attorney, and she hates it.
Like any organization, or you have good attorneys. You have attorneys who don't, some of them don't even look at the electronic side. The electronic side is so much information that's involved in it. We had one matter where the wife was not very non-technical. Let me put it that way. And the husband was very, very technical. He owned a data company, and he wanted to give her some very, very lowball amount, very, very lowball amount. And
as far as their divorce,
as far as their divorce. And so the attorney was smart enough to say, hey, we want Matt to come in. We want to just kind of look at the books, see what's there. And they have what a quote court appointed expert come in and say, hey, we'll grab the books. And literally I got a flash drive for, probably a medium-sized company with a QuickBooks file. I said, QuickBooks file. One thing I said, who's this person that's saying that, that this is okay for a company? I said, first of all, they didn't even forensically image it correctly, meaning it's an exact snapshot of the data. You're talking about a medium-sized company. How do I know that data is not bad, that they didn't just cook the books on that? So we showed that this guy was hiding data in the divorce case, basically got the equivalent of a civil side warrant to essentially hack the company, and went in. This person did the equivalent of shooting the accounting server dead digitally.
He hands over a thumb drive with his QuickBooks
to a court-appointed expert.
Right. And I've seen this where people go through a divorce, and then it's like, hey, you fill out your information. They give them like a sheet of paper, fill in your numbers. The other person fills in their numbers. Maybe you get an expert to come in. And then based on that is how they figure out the numbers, assuming everyone's telling the truth.
Assuming that's correct.
Right.
So that when we look at the data that we call the coming to Jesus conversation, because that's when we look at the data and we say, well, what's really going on here? It's like really taking the blood test and say, let's see what's going on here.
What do you do in that situation if you really want to look at the data? Does the court even let you do that?
Yes. So we were able to articulate to the court that this is not a forensic acquisition, number one. The spouse just handing over a flash drive was just inappropriate. It doesn't even make sense for the size company that they would be running this type of accounting software.
Why are they using QuickBooks if they're such a big company?
Correct.
Okay.
There was other circumstances as well, but then the guy was just not playing nice. He was playing games. So we essentially got a court order to force us to go in and identify where these different assets would reside. We know that they had an accounting system. You said, oh, we don't have an accounting system. So you start scanning. You're like, well, what's this? Oh, that's our accounting system. Okay, so now we acquired it, and what we found out is they physically removed it from the system, or electronically removed it from the system 1 hour before we went in. So it's, this is the games that people play. Long story short, it went from, let's say, I don't know the exact number, but a very low ball number. We identified several millions of dollars the guy was hiding, and she got a very, very good settlement at the end.
Can I ask you a question? Did she hire you? Like, how does this work? Because I know a lot of people that go through divorces, I mentioned. Like, there's one person I'm thinking of. He went through divorce, just did the paperwork, was in real estate. He was in government. And so he had like a regular W-2, so he's just like, my stuff is here. She took money and hid it. And actually, afterward, he found out that she took money and then gave it to her friends to hold.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the court doesn't care, but it seemed like nobody.
Some of the court, it's honestly up to the lawyers. I think and I've worked with a lot of different criminal, civil matters, divorce cases, highly sophisticated hacking cases. Where it's effective is when people stay in their own swim lanes. So a lawyer's there. I don't give legal advice. I never give legal advice. That's for the lawyers to do. They shouldn't give technical advice. Hire an expert on the technical side. I'm not an accountant. Have an accountant, a forensic accountant, do forensic accounting work. That's what's effective. When someone thinks that they don't respect the other side and what they do, that's where it runs into issues. So in terms of, you might have a somewhat of an amicable divorce where there's a level of trust. You've heard the term trust but verify. I've modified it a little bit now. It's really verify then trust. That's typically what we do. And whether it's handing over the mobile devices, and they'll say, oh, but there's privileged information. No problem. We can do what's called culling. We redact that information out. But then we start seeing, crypto transaction, them moving it out, or them telling clients for the business, don't pay, hold off on paying, because now it's going to make their books look higher. It goes on all the time. Money, people do crazy stuff over money.
Why do you think that is?
Money?
Yeah.
I've seen people do absolutely nutty stuff because of money. They have their own motives on why they do different things. There's a lot of anger, resentment that goes on. At least for myself, I've learned to not make decisions based on emotions. Take a few steps back, think logically. Usually it's when the emotions run hot. And you mentioned the divorce cases. I mean, you see the emotions off the charts and just the hatred that goes on. And some of the stuff that comes out of people's mouth, I'm just stunned at the level of hatred. These are people who at one time loved each other. All right. If things don't work out, I get it. There's an amicable way to separate and do things, but they need to sometimes take a step back. And it's just, the divorce cases are often brutal, but I think a lot of times with the money, it's people want to feel like they got that edge up on somebody. Like, hey, I was able to they never found out that these accounts existed. I've had some other cases where in some states it's no fault. So they say, oh, I want to know if my husband or my wife, my spouse was cheating on me. And some states it doesn't matter if the spouse is cheating. But then that sometimes for religious reasons, it does matter. And there is the division of assets.
What do you mean by religious reasons?
I believe it's Hindu. I had one lady contact. She says, I want to see if my husband was unfaithful. He just left. All of a sudden, we were married over 30 years. He just picked up and left. So I said, well, look, if you have the suspicions, probably. She says, but I need to know because there's something in my understanding, there's something in their religion that if they find out, then she's allowed to get more share of the assets. And this individual was he was involved in hedge funds, wealthy guy, and he took care of the money. She was just the wife, took care of the kids, took care of the household, traditional type of marriage. And so I started analyzing the device. It was a lot.
Can I ask you a question? How did you get his device, though? Did you analyze her device or his device?
It was interesting because
I'm not going to hand it to you. Even if I'm not hiding anything, yeah. I probably wouldn't be like, Matt, here's my phone.
So typically what I do is I say, hey, tell me what's in the household. What do you have? Has he ever used your computer? And sure enough, there was a device, her device, that he would use just from time to time. And there's a principle in forensics called low cards exchange principle.
Low cards exchange principle.
Every contact leaves a trace. So, for example, I came from my house. I have 2 Dobermans. I bring something from my house. I bring it here into your studio. Could be, a little bit of dog hair. And when I go home, I bring something from the studio. So every contact leaves a trace. That methodology also works on the digital side as well. The challenge is identifying, collecting that. And that's where some of the challenges come in. You get a lot of people in this industry, in the cyber forensics or the cybersecurity, they're letting the computers think for them. They're just running like automated type of systems. You have to be good at identifying where potential evidence exists. And I got another case, even besides this divorce one we're talking about, that's a great example. So going back to the divorce case, he used a little bit of that device, and I start going through it. Her device. Because
was it a computer, phone?
It was an Apple device. I start going through the device, start really looking through it, and eventually I found some cloud data that also replicated a little bit on that device. And then on that device I start seeing accounts for dating sites that this guy went to prior to. So there was dating sites on it. Again, low cards exchange principle. It's kind of like if there was, God forbid, a murder scene here, you might clean up the environment, but there's always that speck of blood. Same thing with the bits and bytes. There's always that speck of evidence that you get someone who knows what they're doing. They're able to identify it and get those artifacts out. And, we got him. Sure enough,
What does she do?
I don't know.
You
that's
just kind of hand
that's
the
not my
data off
job.
and
A lot of times I'm like, I tell people, I'm like, do you really want to know? And what do you want to know? What's the strategy before we even
does
start
anybody
this?
ever tell you no, I don't want to know?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
often not. I got into the Secret Service because I lost. I think I mentioned to you this before the interview. I had someone close to me that I lost, and when I knelt down by his casket, we didn't know who killed him. He was murdered.
This was your friend, right? Louis?
Louis Balancio, yeah. Louis, I met Louis in first grade. I knew him in first grade. I grew up initially in the Bronx. My grandfather owned the front part of the market on Arthur Avenue. And at that time, there was a lot of Italian Americans. You had good people just trying to make a living, which that was my family. You had the mafiosos, down there as well. But pretty much they left you alone. There was things I didn't understand even at a young age when I'd help out. Like my dad were like, oh, let's go for, I think they called it an egg cream. It wasn't a shake. And you go down to the cafe and I would see a slot machine where people are putting money in. And I'd be like, Daddy, isn't that illegal? And he'd kind of like, don't keep your voice down. And I said, how come the police, later on, I said, how come the police don't do anything? Because people are turning a blind eye to it. And eventually we moved out of the Bronx. We went up to Westchester County, and I lived in Yonkers, right on the border of Scarsdale, Greenburgh, Ardsley. At that time, it was a lot of trees. This is the suburbs, although today they consider it, the sixth borough of New York. And we were crazy. We get into mischief, nothing really bad, no drugs, no drugs or anything like that, no felonies, but we get into mischief, play paintballs, shoot up the neighborhood with paintballs and stuff. But you had different type of people there, and you could go out to a club. At that time, it was clubs were the big deal. And there would be, you'd be with your friends who weren't so much troublemakers, but there would be other people who were troublemakers in that same place. And usually around like 1, 2 in the morning, that's when you kind of have the sixth sense, like something's, time to go. Because that's when the fights would usually break out. Everyone's got the rear muscles and stuff. And I just wasn't like that. I was always a workaholic. I worked 3 different jobs. And Louis, I knew since first grade. Great kid. I came from the Bronx. I went to Our Lady of Fatima in Scarsdale, New York. Which Scarsdale is, pretty rich neighborhood. And I remember we had a race. I lost. Was crying. The kids are making fun of me. And Louis was the only one who came up. He says, "Don't worry, we're going to be friends for life." And he was. He was a brother to me. And the mom, Dorothy, she's like another mom, well-educated family, PhDs. Very successful family. And we just grew up, and I thought I lived in the best place in the world. And I thought I was insulated. It was like, my father, American dream, just moving up, and he taught us, 3 core things: God, country, family, and friends. And that's how I grew up. And I always respected the police. But he came into Pizza Beat, which is still there today. And I was working there as a waiter, and it was my birthday. No, I'm sorry, it was around his birthday. He came in, and I bought him a slice of pizza. And I said, Louis, do me a favor. He says, hey, why don't we hang out? And I said, well, I'm going to go to, I think it was called Streets in New Rochelle at the time. And I said, I'm going to go out with my friend Kenny. I said, but do me a favor, just discriminating in a good way against who your friends are, being very critical on who your friends are, who you hang around is good. Someone's going to wind up getting hurt or killed, and I don't want it to be you. I know you're not a troublemaker, I said, but just be mindful. You're not really going out with your true friends. That was the same night at 2:00 in the morning. I get a phone call from one of my friends, and they said, Louis is dead. So that really killed me. I was just stunned. I turned white as a ghost. He was stabbed 16 times.
How old was he?
3 days after, it was 3 days after his 21st birthday that he was killed. And I remember going to the wake. The mother, she probably didn't realize she said this to me, but she says, why can you have been my son? I know if you were with my son, he'd be alive today. And that just ripped me up inside. So, you know, again, you know, she gave me a hug. I love Dorothy. Again, she's like another mother to me. I just remember that. And you always think back, well, is there something I could have done? Could I have done something different? And 30 witnesses witnessed the murder. No one said anything. And the guys who did it they were called the Tanglewood Boys, and their parents were Lucchese and Genovese crime family backed. Even before that, growing up, you know, from an Italian American family, I never liked organized crime. I hate organized crime. I went to Catholic school, and yet I was discriminated against simply because I was Italian. I would hear the slurs, you know, coming just because I was Italian American. But my family and most Italian Americans, you know, they don't like the mafia types. My father says, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, you know, well, let me help. I'm obviously going to help the police. Whatever information I can provide, I'm going to help the police. And at that time, it was, well, they're still there today, the Yonkers Police Department. We knew that they had gambling machines underneath. The place was not really a good place.
Underneath the police department.
Yeah, Strike Zone Bar
machine.
at that bar. There was all gambling, drugs, and it goes back to, you know, why wasn't this place taken down? Whether it was by the Bureau, whether it's by the, you know, the FBI, whether it's by the Yonkers Police Department. And, you know,
that place, the streets.
Well, this is Strike Zone Bar.
Strike
Zone Bar is where he was killed. And so 30 witnesses, and it almost was like the cops were making excuses for why they couldn't solve it. There was a lot of misinformation coming out that, you know, Albanians, at that time they called the Albanian kids. The Albanian kids actually killed them. They're responsible, almost inciting like that maybe we would do some level of revenge against the kids who did this or kill someone else because of this. So 30 witnesses, I wasn't there. And I just knew the type of person that Louis was. And the papers that went and interviewed some of us, they got it wrong. The first article was completely wrong. They misquoted me in the article. Louis was not part of a gang. They tried to write him off as a gang member. He was not part of a gang at all. But that's the information that went for the longest time, the misinformation that he was part of a gang, and he wasn't.
Did they ever find out who killed Louis?
They did. They did eventually find out, but this person was on the run, I think, for about 6 years, came back, he got convicted. I was threatened in court even before that on a matter involving that.
Was this person a member of organized crime?
Yeah, I think eventually they became a made man. And what happened is they got convicted and then eventually got out because I think it was called Depraved Indifference. Janine Pirro, who's, you know, in the media spotlight, she did a great job on the case. But
she was a DA?
She was a DA, and she did a great job. Never forget the work she did. She did a fantastic job. He eventually, he got out. It got overturned because I think they overturned not his specific case, but depraved indifference is what he was convicted on.
What does that mean?
I don't know the specifics around the legal, but there was different ways that they could have tried the case. I think it was whether it was second degree or depraved indifference, and I think they did it based on depraved indifference and they overturned it. I don't know the specifics on it, but he basically got out. One important thing about that case, the 30 witnesses that witnessed my friend's murder, it wasn't like, okay, there was that murder, they didn't say anything. A month later, these same guys that were involved with the Tanglewood Boys, they were looking to beat up some other guy who slept with one of these kids' girlfriends. They couldn't find him, but his 16-year-old brother was out in New York, and they found him. They stabbed him in the stomach, ripped the knife up, and twisted it, and killed another person. So they could have prevented another murder by coming forward and speaking about it. So that's what people don't realize is they think, okay, you can stay away from trouble, but sometimes trouble finds you. And that's what happened. And eventually there was a informant from inside the gang who basically acknowledged that Louis was just at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Did no one ever come out after, years later, from those witnesses?
Not that I recall. It actually was one of the gang members, I believe it was Darren Mazzarella, who actually came out, spoke about it, because my understanding is the gang members were letting, or the mafia people were letting him take the fall on it.
Is this why you went into law enforcement?
Did. My father said, hey, why don't you, what about the U.S. Secret Service?
How does that come out? Like, that's like a random thing.
My father, he served in the military, he's in the U.S. Army. And we're always the type of family who don't just go to church and pray. There's a lot of people who go to church, they talk, or people who talk a good game, and they're completely different when they get out. We like to see action. We like to see, well, if you're going to complain about it, great, but what are you going to do about it? And he says, okay, well, Secret Service, protection and investigations. I had an uncle who was in the FBI. He was Sicilian translator for...
Sicilian translator?
Yeah, it's funny because, Sicilian, they speak a dialect.
They speak in dialect, and it's true.
And I never spoke Italian fluently either. I tell my father, I'm like, Dad, I can't speak Italian with you because you don't speak proper Italian. He goes, what do you mean? And he would go crazy.
It's true, though, because
of the dialect.
I learned Italian. I would speak it because I lived in Rome, and when somebody from Sicily would speak to me, I would I didn't understand anything. Sorry to the Sicilians. But it's so true.
So I never really learned it fluently, but he's the one that came up with the Secret Service. I said, okay. I said, but the chance to get in the service it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get in the Secret Service.
It is easier than to get
into Harvard. And your chances are absolute zero if you don't try. And you can do anything you want in life if you put your mind to it. And that time when you're younger, you listen to that, but you're like, oh yeah, whatever. You're not really going to make a difference. World's full of problems. You want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So at least I can try and say, hey, I made every effort I can. And that's where I went into the White Plains field office. I was taking criminal justice, and I said, I want to be here. I want to intern here. And they were kind of like, okay, I can't believe this person came in off the street. So Mick Chandrani says, look, we already have an intern here. He was the resident agent in charge, but we'll make an exception and we'll bring you in. I just worked like crazy. At that time, it was physical files. I was making sure everything filed neatly. We had people who'd come in who would make presidential threats, and they were interviewing them. And most of them, I know the politically correct word isn't nuts, but they had mental issues. And they'd say, look, here's, Times Magazine. Don't you see the target, on this person?
Do you know when I used to work the duty desk? Remember the duty desk?
I'm sure you got duty desk stories.
I've got duty desk stories, but when I would work midnight shift for the duty desk is like, at least in the New York office where we were together, it was always open. Our office never closed because obviously it's like the New York office, probably the biggest field office in the country. So the phones would always ring, things going on. But you always knew midnights at the duty desk, you get all the phone calls from people who were committed, who had a severe mental health issues. I mean, people would call us from Bellevue, I remember. And, there was this one woman, I forgot what her name was, but there were certain standard people that would call, and literally she'd be like, hey, they're watching me. And I'm thinking, how are you in Bellevue on the phone calling me at the New York duty desk? And there were times where we would just leave the phone on speaker and just do our work and just let them talk. Sometimes we'd be like, hey guys, how are you? Who's working tonight?
Now, did you notice an uptick when it was a full moon?
No, I am terrible at this. I never pay attention to that stuff or even astrology. Is that true?
There is. I mean, definitely with medical hospitals, they say there's an uptick, and I definitely think there's an uptick with some of the people with, I think the politically correct term is mental disabilities to have an uptick during a full moon. So my duty desk story is, I forget who was working. The phone's there, and it's like 2, 3 in the morning, and you have them start calling in. So you'd have, go more down to the street talk, the nut calling up, one calling, and they just keep calling, and another one call. And then what they did is they actually had the two nuts talk to each other. They interconnected the lines, and they had them talking to each other. So I'm like, I couldn't believe it. Allegedly, let me start with allegedly that's what happened, or I can neither confirm nor deny that actually happened.
People might be appalled listening to this, but it's like, you know what though, when you're working these jobs and they're so severe and you're dealing with people who are, I will say, not that cops don't deal with this, but in the U.S. Secret Service, you really dealt with people that were severely mentally distressed. I mean, it was hard to be exposed to that because a lot of these folks would have fascinations with the people we protected. Obviously, typically the president or the president's kids or the spouse, like there were these severe, fascinations, or what do we call them? Special interests. How did we used to say it?
I think that's right. Special interest. I don't remember.
Yeah, but you have a special interest in a person that I'm protecting. But you had to find humor in it. So actually, that's pretty, it's not funny, but it's pretty interesting that they put them to talk together. Actually, it's quite brilliant, actually, because then I don't have to sit and talk to you. Why don't you talk to each other and you guys can talk conspiracy theories together?
Correct. And there was another one who kept calling, allegedly. They started talking to the guy and they said, I'm sorry, what did you say? You wanted to commit suicide? And then he's like, no, hung up the phone. And then you heard NYPD in the back. He called again. And then you heard NYPD in the background smashing down the door and taking the guy away. So allegedly that happened. But you get all kind of guys that come up. Either they mention suicide. So now you have to do something about it. You can't just stay on the phone, not do something about it. It would be nonstop that they'd be calling. But then you get some of the serious ones as well, where people... you have to investigate what's going on, if there's any truth behind the threats.
Well, we had that PI squad, right? Protective Intelligence, and they're the ones who would actually, when we would get these calls, they would go out and they would do an assessment on who's a severe threat, who's not. That was hard sometimes because they're trying to figure it out, and then some people would fall in the middle. Do you remember those, I remember like when certain people would come into town, they would do an assessment. So let's say like it's President Bush, and they'd pull out the file of all the people that had a special interest in Bush. And there were some folks, remember, they would take them out to dinner or go to the movies with them.
Yeah.
They would like, what do we call it? It was like babysitting.
Yeah. I didn't work in the PI squad, but I heard the stories. Correct.
They would go out and they're like, hey, Bush is coming. Joe has a very unhealthy fascination, but he's not to the level where we can have him committed. And they'd show up to Joe's house and be like, hey, Joe. And he'd be like, President's in town? They're like, yep, let's go to dinner and the movies. And they would just sit and literally babysit Joe to make sure he didn't show up to a rally that Bush was at.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a lot of responsibility for the agents to make determinations on whether there's viable threats. And I think when you're in the job or any job, it doesn't have to just be the Secret Service. I think the Achilles heel is a level of complacency, and we say complacency kills, right? And when you're in the job for a long period of time, you just kind of get used to it. And I would have some people say, oh, you just have Macedonia, and I'm just picking out the name, but you still have those threats. You have foreign dignitaries coming in.
Alive.
Correct. By talking to some of the foreign security, you learn a lot that maybe the intelligence reports don't pick up. So building a good rapport with foreign security is important. I got a good story in terms of foreign security. I'm sure you know the Waldorf Astoria very well. So we'd have a lot of the detail leaders come in from other states that would augment some of the New York staff, and I was out of the New York field office. And some were nice, the detail leaders. Some were not so nice.
So detail leader is like the person that would like be the main go-to for whoever they're protecting. He or she would be kind of like the boss of the protection team assigned to that person.
Correct. So he comes in, he's like, give me, show me the site, everything about the Waldorf, because I was the lead at the time. I was also, not the exact site agent, but I was the lead. So it happened to be Macedonia. I was showing him around. And at the end, he goes, okay, I will deal with foreign security. Thank you for that. It was just, whatever reason, I don't know if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed. So then he says, where's foreign security? I said, right here, sir. And we looked in the hotel room, and John Wayne was on the TV, and they were dry firing their weapons at the TV.
Foreign security?
Foreign security.
Yup. I'm not surprised.
And then he just looks at me. As I said, you're in charge of foreign security. You deal with them. So I look at the room, they turn around and look at me, and I said, guys, put your guns away, and I'll take you to Times Square. And then we became great friends. The guys from Macedonia, we went out, took them to Times Square. They behaved themselves, and we behaved ourselves, and we got along well. But you're a diplomat. You are a diplomat. You are a diplomat dealing with foreign security who may have their way of doing things. And
you always a liaison, different. And things would get escalated to like to the upper staff. Like if you spoke a certain way, like you could ruin a political meeting. I remember, it's funny you're telling me that story about the guns, them pointing the guns. I know that for a fact. I remember once I was standing post. I'm in front of the door for, let's say, a former Soviet Union country that's now a country, and I'm standing post. It's me and then their country. And I remember he's like wanted to show me his gun for some reason. He wanted to know what kind of guns we carried. And I'm standing there and he pulls out his gun and he's like pointing it at me. And when we train it, it's muzzle control. Like your muzzle should never be pointed at anybody unless you're gonna shoot. You should never graze anybody. Like muzzle control, like your muzzle always needs to be pointed somewhere safely, whether there's a round in there or not. This dude pulls it out. He's like, hey, and he's like literally canting it, showing it to me, like pointing it to my center mass. And I was like, whoa. I was like, put that thing down. And like he couldn't comprehend. I'm like, you're about to shoot me center mass. But yeah, it was like the Wild West sometimes when you would work with certain countries, like the level of etiquette. Too many stories. I think sometimes like I think back, and not to make this pro-America, but like I always think about the level of etiquette that we were trained to have. Like we were always told you represent the country, represent yourself in the best way. Like we really like were at a standard. And so there's sometimes I'd work with other countries and I'd be like, how are you in the upper echelons of a country? Or like there were some wild experiences there, like where it would kind of, I don't know about you, but it would like almost make me sad that this was like a world leader or people that were in government making decisions for other people.
True. I mean, you're, I guess, as being an agent, you're sitting in the limousines and you're listening to these conversations from people from all over the world. You're listening to world leaders. And I'm going to be very honest that in my head, I'm like, wow, this is why the world is so fucked up. Plain and simple.
Dude, there was one country, again, I won't say like, and I always respected and honored the job. That's why I never revealed these stories because they're two different animals. Like I was there in a privileged capacity, but there was one country, third world country, and they came to do shopping. And I remember they came with, wasn't the Waldorf, I think it was the Intercontinental, because I used to get the Intercontinental back then. They actually they had to rent two huge trucks to take their stuff to the airport. This is a third world country. People are poor. And they needed to get these two huge trucks to take all their stuff to the airport to load the plane. And their cargo was filled to the max that they had to get a second plane to take the stuff.
And then sometimes we would give them a limited number of vehicles for the protectee, but they would often rent some of the best additional vehicles for staff members and ambassadors, and you just couldn't believe.
One country didn't want to drive our car because we had our own armored vehicles, right? They were vehicles, and there was I'm going to say this wrong, although I love cars. Maybach, am I saying it right?
I don't know.
Maybach,
No,
Maybach.
maybe.
Car enthusiasts, be nice. I can't afford one. That's why I can't pronounce it. This country's like, no, you're not going to drive one of your cars. Our person needs to be. This was let's say a very wealthy Middle Eastern country. And they were like, no, our person can't be driven in one of your cars. So they bought this vehicle. I should say this right because everyone's going to be mocking me. But again, I can't afford one of these. It's a Maybach. I'm going to say Maybach. I know I'm wrong. They buy this car. It's got like 5-10 miles on the dashboard. I show up to do a practice drive. They wanted me to practice driving this car around New York City to make sure I got the hang of it before the head of state came in. And I was just like, holy cow. So I'm driving. I remember I was on Park Avenue thinking, I'm like, I know this is an expensive car. I don't speak car to such a degree. And that's what they would do. They would like, these were the people that ran countries. And then I'd have moments where I'm like, you kind of wonder why the world's in the state that it is when you have certain individuals. And look, if there was a wealthy country and the people were doing well, I'm like, well, okay. But when your people are struggling and it's like you've got like 2 truckloads of cars or Nike sneakers or whatever it is you're coming for, it's kind of a little like.
No, I hear you, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we had one protectee come in, and he just went around collecting rent.
The slumlord. He had a nickname, the slumlord.
And never went to the UN.
The slumlord. He would come in. We won't say what country this is. He would come in. His nickname was the slumlord, but it took us a bit of time to realize what he was doing. He would come in. He had property here, right? I think it was in Brooklyn.
I don't know exactly where it is.
It was in Brooklyn. And he would go collecting the rent. But we would go with him. We would protect him. But he made it appear like we were his muscle. And so he would come in to collect the rent with the U.S. Secret Service. And after some time, agents complained. They're like, dude, this guy's using us to intimidate people to pay him. And I think they nixed it, or they did something to
they had that. And I think, so there was another detail. They had the detail, Secret Service protecting him, and then the country got overthrown and the detail was dissolved while they were here.
Oh.
Look that one up. That was a pretty interesting one. I wasn't on that detail, but I heard about that one as well.
But you didn't do a lot of protection. You would always get pulled for all the tech stuff. Like you were like on all the task forces. Like you were the guy. Can I ask you a question, Matt? Like today, I want to fast forward you to like right now. Like I guess, you're like a vault of knowledge. If you had to say like, what are the things like people, like seriously, like what should people do to protect their data? I'm actually surprised you said you have Alexa in your house. I would think you of all people wouldn't.
They're, like I said, they're getting stuff from the phones, the Alexa devices. I mean, I'm not really worried too much about what I'm going to talk about on the devices. Where I'm working from home at times, and a matter comes in, it's physically unplugged, from the wall, and then I'll have those privileged conversations with attorneys. The privacy doesn't exist anymore. It's out there. It's
so
very,
there's
very
nothing
hard.
people can do. Like what are you the best practices you do to like just shield yourself?
One is a good accounting of where your accounts are, where they're located.
What do you mean by that? Like,
so for example, I use something called Dashlane. It's an application where you input your accounts, your usernames, your passwords, stuff like that is shared with my wife. It's shared. Some of the accounts are shared with my kids. Something ever happens to me, she gets full access, to all of different accounts. So I have thousands of different accounts, passwords. You might say, well, what if they get hacked? Well, they have, but it uses what's called hashing of the passwords. And what happens with hashing is someone can't reverse engineer. They don't have plain text. They don't have the actual passwords. So they don't really store your passwords in that location. But the accounts are identifiable from my wife, from our kids. God forbid we're traveling, my wife and I, something happened to us, our kids would be able to have that location where that stuff exists.
so it's literally an app that just stores all your accounts.
It's one, it's not really meant for, let's say, I want to call it digital legacy management. One of the stuff that I've developed, from MIT with some of my cohorts is a digital legacy management, which is going to be doing data privacy enforcement. So that's going to be coming out in Q3, Q4, through my company, because we do multi-platform designs.
What is the data legacy thing that you're creating?
Digital legacy is helping people to empower individuals with data privacy management and taking ownership back of their data, because your data is out there. What happens to your data when you die? It's out there. It either gets discarded or it gets used, and often it's going to get used by these other companies and likely abused at some point. So this enforces that back, the data privacy, whether you want it to maintain there in that location, or whether you want to grab that data, you want it offline in a secure vault, or you want it on a system that can live for many generations to come. There is advantages for historical data as well, whether it's medical information. Let's say, for example, Italy, I'm going to Italy, or you're going to Greece, and you had your family's historical data. As generations go on, and you're able to look on your phone and like, oh, my family ate at this location, or my family grew up where they in this location over here. There's cool things that you can do with historical data, or metadata as well, which is data about data that says, hey, this person took this picture at this time, at this location. There's tremendous amount of value for what can be done with data, but ultimately you should own that data and or your family. So it puts the decision making back in you, and you might want that data destroyed. And that should be within your right to do that.
Okay. So what else should people... You brought up passwords. Like, what's the thing with passwords?
Passwords are a big deal, because we were talking about companies like Apple, where people, for legitimate reasons, they want to get their own data off. It's difficult, because the goal of most of these companies is to keep that data on their platform and not for that data to move into other locations. So I'll give you an example. There's a thing called dissuading multi-homing. So if you're on Amazon and let's say you want to check Walmart. Well, that's not good for Amazon. They want you to stay on Amazon, not move to Walmart. You want to build a platform, and this is from MIT, that dissuades multi-homing from you going to Walmart because potentially, or abandoning your cart and going to Walmart. Most of the companies want you to keep their data and you're focused. The longer you're on that system, the more you're accessing that system, the more chances you're going to buy, the more data that they have about you or what you're likely going to buy. Understanding where accounts are, closing down old accounts that shouldn't be there. The other thing about the password management system that's strong as well is, as I mentioned, I have thousands of different accounts, passwords. They're all different. All of them are different. I'm not going to remember a 40 character password.
Are your passwords 40 characters long?
All random, 40 plus.
Do you create them, or does this
automatically generated? I don't have to remember of that.
What do you use to do that?
The same application. There's other password. The reason why I use Dashlane.
One?
Dashlane, I use them. There's other ones. I didn't like the way that they were structured. They've been breached, and the hackers got the passwords. Dashlane's been breached. They don't get the passwords because of the way that their infrastructure is built. So they have a good product. I don't work for Dashlane. I don't benefit from mentioning their name, but that usually works very well. And then that works in conjunction with multi-factor authentication. So for example, you might have one master password to access Dashlane. Then you have another app that gives a random number that you have to input as well. And then it'll also detect which device you're coming from. So that's where we are. That's where multi-factor, you have to use multiple different pieces of information to uniquely identify you in order to get access to that information. If not, you're going to lose that data, and it's going to impact your family at some point or another.
So can I ask a question? Is the old school way of doing passwords where you have a notebook and you write all your digits down, all your passwords down, is
it's almost impossible these days, to
write
it all down.
I'm so
So,
but I'm not busting out 40 character passwords.
Correct. So let's say you have good cyber hygiene with your devices, and
I'm questioning my cyber hygiene right in this moment. I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable.
So if you use that same password again, let's say wherever you go food shopping they ask for your an email address and your password, and that same username and password's used for
somewhere else. What's the problem with that? It
winds up on the dark web for that food place that where you do your food shopping. It winds up on the dark web. One of the things I do is you're able to legally grab that data that's brokered on the dark web, and now I test that against some of your financial accounts. I'm not allowed to go into your financial accounts, but if that's what typically the hackers do, they'll use the password that's breached in one location and test it against another.
How about when they get your email on the dark web? Because that's happened to me. I'm like, how does, but again, it's email, it's not secure. What do you do in those scenarios when you get those? And I get these all the time. Hi, your Norton virus is going to expire. We just charged your account. Hi, there's a bill that you just paid for $500 to PayPal. If there's any issues, please give us a call. What do you do in those scenarios when can you even get your stuff back, or are you just done?
I usually have one throwaway, I call it a throwaway email account, and use that for junk. And the other one, you want it on a reliable platform that helps to filter a lot of that stuff out.
What do you mean by that?
So for example, if you're getting phishing emails or fake emails that says, hey, click on here, or you're Norton, you need to renew this. The ones who are the biggest victims of that are typically the elderly. We'll get social engineered, someone calling up and saying, hey, we're from, Best Buy, or we're from this, and we want to, we overcharge your account. We want to give you a refund. Can you give me this? And they're able to engineer and get the stuff back. So that's really where some of that happens.
Could you break down? I'm sorry, sure. Matt. You talked about social engineering. Could you break down what social engineering is exactly?
Social engineering is the art of manipulation.
Okay, walk me through it.
So it's manipulating people to give up information that they normally would not give up. So you mentioned foreign companies. When I do assessments for different companies, we'd go into places let's say in the Middle East. They see a white guy walking in with a suit and a clipboard. They would let us walk in, and we get access to banking systems. So it's a way to manipulate the other party, giving up information. Typically, it's done over the phone. There's a lot of Nothing against Indian people, but there's in India a lot of these illegal call centers are there. They'll call up and they will manipulate people to give them access to their computer, to give them access to passwords, and then they wind up pilfering their accounts.
What are they usually like? What's the guise like? What is the way they do? Like, what are some common examples of like how they do that? Like to get someone to start giving them information.
Oh, I can talk from lower examples, and I can talk from one that came in for me on the example for an elderly scam where they're being socially engineered. There's also romance scams as well. Social engineering them would call them up and say, "Hey, we noticed you went shopping, and we noticed we overcharged you." And let's say the elderly person who still want to be helpful. Oh, the only place they went shopping was Target. Exactly. It was at Target, and we saw you made a last purchase, and they might say, "Oh, what was the last purchase you made?" It was for $134. Oh, we accidentally charged you, $1,000. We need your social security number. We need your bank account information. Then they'd say, okay, I'm going to send the money back. Oops, I accidentally refunded you $5,000. I need the money moved back. And the elderly people often move more money back or give access to the people to help them move the money back before it's too late. And they're very good at what they do. As you know from probably dealing with some of the Nigerian organized crime, you have some really smart people who are scammed as well. As I mentioned, romance scams. You have
one of my employees fell victim to one. But keep going.
To a romance scam?
Yep.
Yeah. So romance scam potentially find people who are widowed or people who are on dating sites. Maybe the guy, he's an older guy, maybe not as attractive, and all of a sudden this beautiful woman messages him and they start conversing back and forth. We've had women who were scammed as well. One lady she was widowed. I couldn't believe it. Smart lady, made a lot of money. She was in defense contracting, and the guy said that he needed money. He was on an oil well some type of oil platform in West Virginia, offshore. West Virginia, there is no offshore platforms, but she sent the guy money because he said he needed to be medevaced to a hospital.
So it sounds ridiculous like when you say this, but how are they able to build people's trust? It's not like, hi, my name's Bob. Can you send me money to medevac me? Like, how do they target them?
They work off of people's emotions. Most people, whether they admit it or not, they're going to make decisions off of emotions. That's how most decisions are made. They learn what makes different people tick, what makes them operate. And they know how to manipulate that. They're very good at doing that. They're very good at collecting and manipulating that and using social engineering, using data to get people to do various things.
Why don't you think, Matt, people feel bad when they do this stuff? Like, especially elderly scams. Like, I guess that from a human standpoint, I know we've been talking very technical, but from a human standpoint, because you deal with so many people also, like what's wrong? Because this is becoming quite prolific.
I brought up before about how my friend was murdered. I hate crime. I hated crime for such a long time. People will find a way even to do horrific things to justify their actions. And I know there was a study in the past after World War II. There was a guy behind a machine, and his job was to push a button to shock.
Mildred.
Correct, to shock the person on the other side. And people thought they were shocking him. It went all the way up to where it could be potentially severe, and they just kept doing it because they were told to do it. With that said, I've traveled to a lot of different countries, both in the government and the private sector, as you have as well. And yes, we have advantages in the United States, and other people, when they're worried about what type of food, if they can put food on the table, they will find a way to justify their actions. Even murderers. How do you get people to confess? A lot of times they get people to confess to some horrific crimes because they say, look, I understand why you did it. Pretend like somehow it was justified. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, yeah, you're right. She asked for it. She did this, and that. Totally understand. It happens. And they would confess to pretty heinous crimes.
Do you know, though, it's easier for me to get confessions for violent crimes than for fraud crimes? It'd be easier for me to get a confession from someone saying that they hurt someone, rape, murder, whatever, than it was to say that they stole $50 from someone.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think that for individuals, there there's a lack of empathy these days. We're living very much in a society, in my opinion, that's very much just about that individual. In the service, what we learn is to actually serve. We're there to serve other people, not to serve ourselves. And whether it's in the Secret Service, whether it's in another job that you're doing, and it could be even the person who you're going to order fast food from. I teach my kids, say thank you. They're not your slave. They're not your servant. Put the phone down. Show respect to the other person. Where does your ethics come from? Does it come from religion? Does it come from law? Where are you getting your ethics from? A lot of this, comes into play in terms of how people justify their actions. I'm a World War II buff. I went to one of the best places I visited was where the Normandy D-Day landings were. And I seen from there, when I look at what happened during World War II, how did an entire nation do some of the horrific things that they've done? It gets progressively worse because there's a lack of empathy and there's a justification, or we turned a blind eye to it. It wasn't me who did it, was really someone else. That's where I see a lot of that occurring on that side, even on the criminal side as well. I've learned, for me, I take emotions out. I learn to look at evidence, look at it objectively. When I provide an expert opinion, it's based on the evidence analyzed to date. There may be additional evidence that hasn't been identified to date, which may change that expert opinion. And I've learned lessons myself where I thought, okay, here's our suspect, here's our guy or girl. Turns out it's not. So you can't let emotions judge that. And the best advice that I was given going through training, someone said, don't look to prove someone's guilt. Look to prove they're innocent. Let them hang themselves by their own rope. Not literally, but let the evidence lead where it's going to go. And that has served me well, whether it's on the criminal side, whether it's on the civil side, and it's objective analysis of data. But you have to start with good data. The identification, collection, and preservation of data is very, very vital. I've had 3 cases, like I said, where data was manipulated, where someone tried to put child pornography on even high-profile individuals. I'm not going to obviously mention the names. I've had divorce cases where it looked like this guy is a real bastard, this guy's going down, and it turned out that the wife was actually manipulating the data and forging the emails.
Do you find that it's usually women who try to do this to men, or men who do it to women, or does it not? Is it random?
I'm indifferent. I honestly, I take that out.
Not your opinion. I guess I was just saying based off of what you've seen. Like, is there a pattern, or maybe there is no pattern?
From my observations, I feel that women can be more emotional. Not all of them, but I see usually it's more emotional. There's times where they can jump to conclusions. Men, they can be at times what I've seen indifferent. Maybe there is emotions to it, but when it comes down to money and possessions, I've seen them a little bit more gravitating a little more selfish, in my opinion, in that. But I hate to generalize on either way. I just learned so many lessons to just step back, look at the evidence objectively, and I learn something new every day. When I analyze materials, it's just I'm blown away by what I see. Even on the civil side, people asked me when I left the service, they said, how does it feel once you left? And it was very difficult leaving. It was not easy. It was an amazing feeling.
I remember when you left.
Oh, it was devastating to me. When I got in the service, and I mentioned this before I got on, my father passed away 2 years ago. And when I got on, I never forget what he said. When I got my badge, I was staring at it. He saw me staring at it. He goes, Ferrante. No, not Ferrante. I'm talking because I'm talking to you. He says, Matthew, he says, remember, as I'm staring at the badge, he says, it's the individual who makes the badge, not the badge who makes the individual. Wherever you are, whether you're in the Secret Service, you're in the private sector, I'm not impressed by anyone, whether it's the CEO, whether it's a foreign head of state, whether it's the President of the United States. What are you doing to make the world a better place? And if you're not doing it, what are you doing in that position? And I don't care if you're left, I don't care if you're right, Democrat, Republican, doesn't make a difference. Are you making the world a better place? And all of us need to kind of step back and say, well, are things getting better? Is the world being better? And objectively look at the metrics. Problem is people are skewing the data. We have very short attention spans these days. I see when you go to restaurants, you see a family of four sitting down, they're not even talking to each other, or they're flipping through the phone super fast. How do you absorb that information? You're not. You're just being fed something really quick, and the attention span is really short, and that's going to leave issues for error. When you talk about AI, learn AI from MIT. People are like, oh, AI is coming. AI's been here. It's been here in social media. And what's happened? Hatred. A lot of hatred going on in social media. Is there good things that can be done with social media? Absolutely. But what's going on is going, and I studied AI, studied blockchain technology. World's gonna be a very, very different place in a very, very short period of time.
What do you think?
I think we're in trouble. I think there's a lot from what I've learned. They said, well, some people think it's going to be a utopia. It's going to be great. Yes, there's going to be great things. I think lifespans, will increase. There's going to be medical breakthroughs. It's also going to be used in a fashion to cause harm, even death, because it's coming no matter what. But the biggest thing, whether it's cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and I mentioned this in the beginning, it's accountability and responsibility. So if someone's negligent, they're reckless with how the stuff is implemented, where's the accountability? What happens when there's a data breach? They hide behind the lawyers. They call up the insurance providers. They say, here you go. Oops, we need to work better with law enforcement. 20 years ago, they were saying the same thing. We need to work with law enforcement. No, if you are negligent, and there's specific wording around that, and you are reckless with your environment, you should be held accountable, whether it's criminal or civil, and it needs to pierce the corporate veil. You'll fix things very fast, very fast. So there's things I learned when I go to other countries as well, where certain crimes that didn't happen. Good example is when I was going through criminal justice, because they would say, hey, and you're never going to solve the drug problem. You're never going to solve certain types of crime. I said, really? I said, well, let's talk about drug problems. How many drug problems are there in Saudi Arabia or UAE? Go and steal something there, and then give me a wave after and see if your hands are still exist. It's not going to happen. Now, I'm not saying chop off people's hands. You said it can't be done. It can be done. And there's a smart way to do it. Humans are reaching what's called singularity, where they call us wetware, almost like computers. We store information, we process information. But where AI is going, it is going to surpass human intelligence. We are giving that up. It's happening. Get the best chess players in the world. They've been beaten a long time ago. Same thing's going to happen with AI. Long time ago, let's say back even before I was in the service, I used to remember people's phone numbers, right? That's storage. Like a computer,
I remember my childhood phone number.
Store information. I'm not saying that people should remember their phone number, but now what is a telephone? What is a mobile phone? It's an extension of you. You're considered a cyborg. It's a computer extension of you. Now the difference is that they're processing information. People are no longer doing the problem solving. If Google doesn't say it, it doesn't exist. I would have texts coming in. I say, I need you to solve this issue. They're like, can't be solved, can't be done. I'm like, if I have to solve the issue, I'm going to raise hell. Use your brain. Learn how to do effective problem solving. If not, and you're offsetting that to computers or AI, what benefit are you providing? You need to augment the technology to up your game. Most people say in the tech industry, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to somebody using AI. So going back, probably showing my age, typewriters, right? I used to type on the typewriter.
I did my U.S. Secret Service application for Ante. I was just like, thank God for that correct auto erase tape.
Correct. But you wanted to minimize how much whiteout was there. And then you had the computers where the word processing comes in, the automatic spell checker. There's a higher expectation in how you.
So are we becoming dumber?
I think if you read some of our founding fathers, the ingenuity that they would have, far smarter than we are today. People, they just don't have the attention span. They don't have the drive. They're educated. They're knowledgeable, but you have to learn how to apply that. There's people who are going to college and they're coming out with a degree that's like a coupon. They think they're just going to cash it in for something. My son, he's going to college. We went around to different colleges. I'm not going to say the name of the college. $60,000 a year. And we're in the business class.
How much a year?
$60,000. So we're in for they're doing like a an introduction to the school. We didn't sign yet. We're sitting there, and of course, they start saying, you know, they have a stock ticker going around. They have some of the computers out. I raise my hand, so he rolls his eyes. But hey, it's $60,000 a year. I want to make sure I'm getting my return on investment.
It's like he has Ferrante for a dad. He should know better.
You know, well, yeah. You know, Dennis Letts. I don't know if you remember Dennis Letts.
I remember Dennis.
He described me best. He says, Ferrante, he just has a low tolerance for bullshit. I don't care. If I'm wrong on something, I'm going to say I'm wrong. Let's fix it. Let's find a way, because everything I'm going to think about logically on what's the correct answer. How do we, you know, best solve the problem? So going back to school, I said, okay, we know that there's a lot of transformation coming. There's Moore's law. Every 2 years, the technology doubles. What are you doing to prepare the students in business or tech to come out and make sure that they're staying up to date? He says, the professor says, we're getting them certified in Excel. $60,000 a year, they're coming out and they're getting certified in Excel.
That should have happened years ago.
Well, Excel? I mean 60, yeah, of course. But I'm not saying Excel's advanced. You probably use about maybe 10, 20% of what it can do. But you're not, Excel just doesn't cut it these days, not with what's going on with the latest tech. So my son on the right hand goes, Dad, at first when you raise your hand, I rolled my eyes. He goes, then I thought about it, like, that's a really, really good question. And even before I talked to the person who is in charge of the computer department, he goes, yeah, we're really screwed up. MIT said they have to change their undergraduate and the graduate program because they know it's a big problem. Because if you're doing a program that's 2 to 4 years, by the time you get out, you're obsolete.
You're obsolete.
Correct. And it's a big problem. So they need to change it. So I think a lot of it's going to move to certification type.
Because that way it's faster.
It's a lot faster. Quicker. It's moving a lot faster. I told a lot of people to do coding. You know what we're taught in MIT? Low code or no code.
What does that mean?
Low code or no code. They want to eliminate coding. A lot of the coding is automated at this point. You don't need to do heavy technical. You're able to leverage other systems to achieve the different jobs or tasks. There's going to be people who are going to have, there's going to be 3 or 4 people in a company that are going to have $1 trillion company. That's coming. That's coming down the pike. I think it was Einstein. I'm not going to say his quote the right way, but he said, you know, essentially imagination more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. We need people's imagination. We need that ingenuity to come and then augment with AI, augment with the technologies, learn how to monetize not just your data, but large data. What I do is I take companies and make them data first companies. How do you become more efficient, more effective with large data? Now, a lot of the people who are with AI, with the big companies, what are they saying? Oh, no, it's just a lot of people don't want to do these jobs and AI is going to take care of those jobs. I've been at the executive level. People were producing, a large number of people were absolutely producing. And I'm in the board meetings and they're like, cut 10,000 employees. And I'm just like, hey, just so I understand, but they're making money. Yeah, but it'll look good for the investors. That's the way it's done. And those decisions are done quick.
We didn't get to talk about this, but you and I were both together in the New York field office. You were there, you know, on September 11th as well. And do you know, Matt, I don't know anything about your experience. Actually, I can't say I ever really talked about it with people. I was always kind of quiet about it. I didn't talk about it till after, to be frank, after I left. Where were you on that day? Like, what was that day like for you? Because I don't know anything. Yeah,
since 9/11, I was down on 9/11. I've never went down back to the 9/11 memorial. I just stay away from that. It was a beautiful day, just like everyone else describes. And I remember I was like, am I going to work out today, or am I going to hit, Starbucks or whatever the equivalent was? I believe it was Starbucks at that time. So, but whatever my expensive latte was coming off the elevator, and then all of a sudden, someone's going to get away from the windows. The windows blew out in 7 World Trade.
So you were at work when the first plane hit?
Yes. And I remember seeing the jet fuel coming down and then igniting people on fire on the ground. People get what's called tunnel vision. I'm sure you're familiar with tunnel vision, where they narrowly focus on one thing, but they're not really aware of their surroundings. And it was just a surreal experience. And I remember, I forget who it was, who called out of the loudspeaker, evacuate the building. So I'm going down the stairs. Some lady just had like super strength. She just locked up. People just do strange things, during critical incidents or crisis, and she wouldn't move and people couldn't get down. So we literally had to really hard, like shove her to get her to move, and then carried her down the rest of the way. I remember one of my bosses, while bodies were dropping off the building, hitting the ground. It sounded almost, I hate to refer to it this way. It sounded like literally like a dumpster was being dropped off a building. That's how loud it sounded. If you're from the New York area and you hear when, it's dropped, you just hear boom,
the clanking
like really
of
loud.
the
Exactly.
steel, right? Like click, 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 like
Exactly.
that. Yes.
And I was right near the Trade Center, and that's remember what I was hearing. The bodies coming down. And it was just a surreal experience. And I remember the boss said, "Hey, we need to set up triage. I want to, it's completely optional. Whoever wants to stay." And in my mind, I'm like, fuck that. These are my people, burning up there. I took an oath, and you remember coming out of training, but right before you graduated, you took an oath to defend the Constitution, defend the United States against foreign and or domestic enemies. And I'm staying. Whatever happens, happens. So it is. This is what I came here for. Now, would you expect something like that to happen? Absolutely not. But we set up triage behind the American Express building, or I call it the American Express building. We'd go in and out, take people, from the building. The shards of glasses would be coming off of the building. Literally, it was like slow motion.
Matt, were we together?
I don't know. There was I remember stuff in like clips. Like I remember small clips of that day. And I've never really spoken about it with my kids. My kids don't ask me about it. Like I said, I'd never been down to the memorial. I was helping one lady come out with, and I had her arms and her skin just came right off because of the burns. It was just so surreal where when you're seeing the bodies come up, hit the ground, because a lot of times when you see the 9/11, annually 9/11, they'll talk about 9/11, but it's usually they show it from a distance. They're not showing it up close. When the first building came down, I remember I hauled ass behind the Amex building because someone said run, it was coming down, and I just felt other people, I guess they felt it was a good spot as well, just boom, 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 like hit up against me, and I thought I was going to die. I felt at peace. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel scared, kind of accepted death. I felt the presence of my friend Lewis, who died. I for whatever reason, I just felt that. The building came down. Somehow I didn't die. I thought I was going to suffocate because you're in that cloud of plumes. And I forget who the other agent was, but one agent was like, "Hey, let's, jump into the building." I said, "You have no idea about the structural integrity of the building." I didn't say it like that, but I said, "Don't go in the building. You don't know if that's going to collapse as well." People who were watching it from a distance, that planes went in. You didn't even know it was a plane. Remember, there was a bombing on the Trade Center even before that.
I didn't know it was a plane either.
Correct.
I had no idea what it was.
There was stuff that I've seen that day and thereafter that hasn't been spoken about. And I don't think it's appropriate to speak about it. But one of the things I prayed for when my friend died was for God to give me the wisdom to understand right from wrong, to have knowledge. And sometimes in life, you got to be careful what you ask for. You might just get it. And I just remember feeling it was almost like a slap in my face, because I joined the service not to take lives, but to protect lives. And who would ever envision something like that? And that's just pure evil. And I think most people don't understand that. Most people think in the sense of, well, I wouldn't do something like that. Like somebody wouldn't go and kill somebody. I wouldn't do that. So therefore somebody else would. But there is genuine evil in this world. So if you've interviewed real murderers, people who maybe have committed, 4 or 5 murders, they have no soul. I can't explain it. It's almost like they have no soul. And there is that type of evil in this world. I forget who I was with that day as well. I remember we were carrying cops who had their legs ripped open to the NYPD boat crew, whatever they're called, to evacuate. We got people there. One of the things that they don't talk about on 9/11, there was no black, white, Christian, Muslim. It was people helping people. And that was one of the greatest things. I remember a guy at a hot dog stand giving water, helping, to clean kids' faces. He looked like he was of foreign ethnicity. You had white people helping black people, civilians helping cops helping civilians. That's one of the positive things that I've seen. And I remember coming back after the first collapse, there was ammunition going off because we had U.S. Customs building and stuff, but I thought it was a firefight. I thought, this is all out war, it's a firefight. And there was a lot of people who busted my chops.
That was Building 6.
Okay.
Building 6, U.S. Customs was in that building. Yes, you're correct.
So a lot of people used to bust my chops because I always wore my gun. And there was others who didn't. They would put their gun, they'd go in the office, they put their gun in the drawer. And maybe this came from mixed martial arts. I'm like, you think you're going to have time to go, oh, excuse me, let me get my weapon and grab my weapon. So there's a lot of people who didn't have their weapon that day. Going back to even before the first one fell, they asked for volunteers to go up and get fat kits. They called them the emergency kits. So I volunteered. I went up, grabbed the fat kits, and we were doing the triage. After the second one fell, I came back, and I just remember there was one fireman on a fire truck, completely covered. I said, hey, it might have even been after the second one fell, but he was pretty much gone. It was probably after the first. And I said, where are the guys? He said, they're all dead. The guy was just crying. The only reason why I evacuated after the second one went is because there was information that there was gas leaks, that the west side may collapse because I guess there was something that held up the water from coming in. So there was risks about that. So I evacuated. I want to say it's Jersey City because we were given triage there. Somebody gave me, we call them tickets, not really. It was tickets to identify whether somebody they're going to die, whether they need immediate medical assistance or whether their injuries were low. And you'd rep the tag, almost like a war. I'm not a medic. We get first responder type of training, but that's what they gave. No one came because they were dead. You either got out or you died. That's pretty much what I saw. And then eventually I had difficulty breathing. They had a race me to Queens Medical Center. I got treated there. I still have a floater in my eye from, I got my eye cut from glass. Obviously breathing all that stuff. I still get treated for, breathing issues and just the migraines that I would have after that. And some of it I think is from the debris. Some of it was from all the stress. Even from that evening going home, and my parents thought I was dead because I was able to make a phone call while all this was going on. They said, hey, just tell your parents you're okay. And this is before the towers fell. So they got that phone call, I'm okay. And then went down, my family thought I was dead. I think the hardest thing for that day and thereafter is not being able to help the people that you thought you'd be able to help. You go into the agency, they teach you don't fail. You go to help people regardless, and people think, oh, this is like, Secret Service, you're just protecting the president. No, you're protecting foreign people. You're protecting, everyone's on that list. That was probably the biggest thing, that it was like a slap in my face. I still look at my the Valor Awards and stuff, and I think I look at it today, and I think I said one time, I said, it's not a list of my awards, it's a list of my failures. So I remember seeing the buildings fall over and over on TV. I give Weaver a call. He says, hey, you don't have to come back. No one has to come back for like, months. Take as much time as you need. And I just said, nah, we were attacked. I said, I'm not going to sit here watching buildings fall over and over again. He says, well, what do you want to do? I said, I said, let's find a home with him. I said, let's find a home. And we set up shop at John Jay College on the Upper West Side. And we were working off of lunch tables. And one of the initial cases I did was on 50th and Broadway, working with the AT&T trunk systems. And my understanding from what the FBI was doing was had analysts looking at all these numbers, like manually looking at numbers from pay phones, trying to piece stuff together. And we brought them in and said, hey, look, this is what we're doing here on these different type of system on PBX hacking and private branch exchange, I think it's called. Let's see what we can do for credit card fraud to help identify some of the people. And we got set up fairly quick. There's other agents working on the case to help identify one of the co-conspirators with that. I went back to some of the numbers.
So you were able to, through credit card fraud, identify one of the co-conspirators for 9/11.
Not me specifically. One of the agents, the Secret Service, absolutely. One of them did that. We were able to do that, use that. Then from the stuff that I was doing with the AT&T trunk lines, we used the same methodologies to help uniquely identify a lot of these other co-conspirators. And I don't know if that's ever been talked about. I don't read any of the 9/11 Commission stuff. The FBI came in, they saw what we were doing, and literally like the next day they took some of the other folks. They were gone, and that were working with us in the industry. The agency, I know the intelligence agencies and stuff had just taken that to a whole nother level. But some of the stuff, the guys that I was working with to arrest on the calling card fraud, I went back and just kind of looked at some of those other materials that we had. And I said, hey, I want you to run this for hot numbers, see if there was anything, because what they would do is they would get the calling card numbers, then they would hack PBXs. They would go through multiple points before they hit other places, let's say in the Netherlands or in the Middle East. And I said, it's just odd. Like they already stole the numbers, rerun the numbers. And we found out that there were hot numbers and took down an Al-Qaeda cell in the Netherlands, another one in the Middle East. But I just offloaded it to other folks, and it was just nonstop casework coming in, supporting JTTF through the Secret Service. My understanding is the FBI at that time couldn't go and interview someone. They almost had to go in front of a board to get approval to interview. But if they were paired up with the Secret Service agent, now they can go with another federal agent and do an interview. So a lot of that was the pairing up with some of the agents to do some of the interviews. Fast forward, going in, and post 9/11, I just seen, maybe it's because they're just too large. And I think maybe that's one of the best things that the service had. We can do a lot more with a lot less. And you see some of these larger companies doing that as well. Like even Amazon, they're massive. And we studied them in MIT, and they set up groups where Bezos doesn't want groups larger than enough to feed them with 2 pizzas.
I heard that.
Correct. So smaller is better. You're faster. You're able to get stuff done better. And I think there's a lot of bureaucracy in the bureau, and it's just a self-feeding thing. And again, my uncle was in the bureau. Again, you got great agents, I'm sure, from the rank and file. But sometimes you create a bureaucracy, and it's just, you need to move faster. You need to innovate. And I think that the service, really their secret sauce is the diversity they've always had, whether it's, the background, whether it's cultural, as well as the smaller groups that you're able to work with, or put it together a virtual group. Get someone from counterfeit, get someone from protection intelligence, get someone from e-crimes, and they're able to solve, very complex problems very good using innovative type of thinking.
You know what you're talking about, Matt? Actually, I think you're correct, because I remember working on something, and I worked a lot of cases with counterparts from the FBI. I could be mistaken, but if I recall correctly, they would have to ask permission from a supervisor to go do an interview. And then the supervisor had to give them approval, where we would just go. Like, I didn't have to, I'd be like, hey, boss, whatever squad I was in, I'm going to go. Like, you just would tell somebody where you're going, so somebody knew where you were in case something happened to you.
Yeah.
I think you're correct. Like, we would just be like, yeah, I'm just going. And we would go. And with them, like, there was a process they had to follow, and they had to get the okay to go to talk to somebody. And I was just like, what? Correct.
So we were given a lot more freedoms to get stuff done. And that's what we're seeing now with a lot of successful organization. It's a decentralization, the companies that are decentralizing and allowing some autonomy for people to do their jobs effectively. We're seeing them as most effective. But that's what happens with the larger organizations. I think they're going to continue to have issues. I'm not just talking about large bureaucracies like the Bureau, but I'm just talking about large organizations in general. Yeah, they got the money to throw out the problem, but money's not everything. And that we would do protection matters where people think automatically, oh, Secret Service, you guys got unlimited budget. No, we don't. No, a lot of times.
The motto in the Secret Service was do more with less. That was the motto.
Absolutely.
And FBI definitely got all the money. I was just like, who's getting our budget? Because it's...
Absolutely. 9/11, we're up at John Jay College. They gave us space in there. We're working stuff over there. I lost sight of a lot of different agents. It just people that I've known in the office. Everything changed. There was a cleanup after that. Then I went, they let me go to XAP school. It was called at the time Electronic Crime Special Agent Program, and then U.S. Critical Infrastructure. I got to see the U.S. critical infrastructure, absolutely horrified by the stuff that keeps our infrastructure together.
Like what?
Age, antiquated, electric grid, just awful. And they really need to fix it. I mean, all this money from COVID, all the money that went, why don't you update the grid? Do a smart grid, change the stuff around. Let's see infrastructure. The bridges are falling apart. You know, they need to fix the bridges. They're doing some of those projects I hear from people who work on the bridges. But when I travel to foreign countries, granted, they're not as big as the United States, but I see excellence. I see excellence in terms of the way the bridges are constructed. I'll still call it the Tappan Zee, but the Mario Cuomo Bridge. I mean, you see a bridge now. That's beautiful.
It the Tappan Zee. It's called
I still call it
I didn't know it changed its name.
Bridge. But I think we need to deliver on that scale. We need the basic infrastructure built or rebuilt in an appropriate manner because just to go to JFK from New Jersey, it's cost you an arm and a leg. I mean, the cost that you're getting to JFK, I don't even know what it is now, maybe $30 if you're going from New Jersey. I should get a cappuccino as soon as I pull up to the GW. It's amazing how much it cost. So
what do you think though about our infrastructure here in the U.S.? Like this has come up repeatedly. A lot of concerns have been raised, and I kind of like nobody's paying attention. Do you think like that's where we're the most susceptible?
We need to reinvest in infrastructure. There's I have an electric vehicle. I'll give you an example. I do. A Ford Mustang Mach-E. Love the car. Did I do it to be greener? Honestly, no. I'm not going to lie. Are they greener? Probably not, because the mining that goes into lithium and the car itself, they probably cause more pollution. You're just exporting your pollution someplace else. With that said, I love the vehicle. But my friend who's in Con Edison, he says the grid can't handle this. If everyone got e-vehicles tomorrow, electric vehicles, the grid, it would collapse. It would collapse. And we're going to continue to have these issues. Now, if you have a malicious actor, a nation state actor that wants to bring the infrastructure to its knees, they can do it. And who's going to be accountable for that? Is it going to be pointing fingers, left and right or the other way? Where's all this money going? Why isn't our grid, being put together better? In MIT, I had I have a friend from Saudi Arabia. Like 6 major projects. You can look at the stuff that they're doing. I've been to Dubai. I've been to Oman. Give Dubai as an example. Look at the infrastructure that they put in place. That people have pride what they put in. We need to have the same thing in the infrastructure that we're putting in place. And these need to be continuing projects. But American way of thinking, and I can give examples of this, is typically fix on failure. They wait till something breaks, or squeeze every penny out of what you have. Don't upgrade, don't fix, squeeze every penny out of what you have. And if it fails, guess what? The government's going to come to the rescue, print more money, and then they're going to fix it. But you want to maximize shareholder value and just maximize your profit and squeezing in. So that's what I've seen in terms of the grid. There was an area, actually, do you know what part of the United States is the most redundant?
What do you mean by that?
Because it's all separate grids. New York is different from let's say Florida, and it's different from California. You have different electricity. And I'm not saying I'm an expert in all of it, but what area of the country pretty much will never go down?
I don't know.
Las Vegas. So you're gambling, your casinos,
that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's Las Vegas. It's not going down because they built it the right way with a lot of different redundancies in play. But there was a part of the infrastructure, I'm pretty sure it was in California, converted AC to DC or vice versa. And they had it in this airtight room. All the people who knew how to put it together no longer existed. They didn't have a succession plan on how to fix that. And this goes, I've seen it whether it's on the electric grid, I've seen it in people's cybersecurity, and typically with breaches, like I've mentioned before, when there's a major impact, they say, oh, how did this happen? People start pointing the fingers. But a lot of times people know if it's assessed the right way, these are the issues. Well, what are you doing to fix it? Let's put it the right way. And sometimes stuff can happen. People don't anticipate. But for the most part, I have seen in a lot of different places a level of negligence or recklessness that really should have been addressed, and people don't do stuff, or they're afraid to speak up.
Is America asleep at the wheel? Why aren't things getting
America's
taken?
has historically been asleep at the wheel. I mean, if you look at Pearl Harbor, okay, some people will argue and say, okay, we knew that was coming, but we were hit at Pearl Harbor, and then after that, we were hit in the Philippines. We were caught with our pants down as well. 9/11. People are saying that, that 9/11 could have been prevented. I think there was an issue back then where the intelligence community couldn't really talk to the law enforcement community. We are taught, and I'm not saying the Secret Service has all the answers. We don't. But we were taught to think 5, 10 steps ahead, like a chess game. Americans typically think in 4-year cycles, election cycles. The Chinese think in 15, 30 years. They'll think long term. How do you have an executive leave a company when a company's failing or not doing profit? They're not profitable, and they still leave with the golden parachute and they still make money. It's a problem. We're not thinking, long term, and they're not held accountable sometimes for the metrics. So for some of your viewers, even when you deliver, it doesn't mean that you're going to do better. I've seen, like I mentioned before, I've seen people who've produced revenue. They're still cut. They still cut the jobs for odd reasons, or the company just wants to take a different direction. But Americans, what I've seen historically is it's typically fixed on failure. People like Elon Musk, they're doing great things. They want the best of the best. I don't think he wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to hire because this person, I like their hair. He wants results. There needs to be result oriented. And if you want to start your own company and do your own thing, you're going to get it through 3 core things. And my father always told me this, and it's true: blood, sweat, and tears. And I had all those things. The Secret Service has taught me blood, sweat, and tears. I'm a workaholic. I've worked in the major enterprises, both internally as well as doing a startup. So those who work in large enterprises, you're sitting in there like, okay, maybe you work in the financial sector. I know it all. Okay, try doing a startup. See how tough it is. So I have respect when I go into the small business, because I know it takes a lot for these small businesses to run and to compete in today's day and age, which is increasingly difficult for these small businesses to do. Who's taking care of them? Maui, you got people after the devastating fires there. I was there not too long ago. What did the government give them? My understanding was $700 a person. It's no longer in the news cycle, but $700 a person. Where we're sending all this money to Ukraine. And maybe we need to send the money to Ukraine. What about our people? What's being done about it? Who's being held accountable for that? Whatever you do, whatever any of your listeners do, they have to put passion to it. And we're very good at pointing the finger, but you need to point the finger at yourself first. How could I have made things better? And you know what? I worked for the government back during 9/11. I did what I did. I thought I did everything I could possibly do at that time, but I'm still part of the government. I'm still responsible. Maybe there's something better I could have done, or the government could have done better, but I was still part of that organization of the government. And we failed. We failed that day in protecting our people. So who's right now, and you know the way malicious people are, they are planning the next 9/11 or something greater. What is being done to prevent that? Are we really being protected? And if we're not, who's going to be held accountable for that? And Americans have short memories, and we need to, there's certain things that just never go away. There is evil in the world. We're not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes in our country, but we try and do the right things. But I think that people are being spoon-fed stuff that may not be the reality. A lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen it, where press reports come out and they're not exactly accurate.
It's interesting. I do the U.S. news. I'll go on the U.S. news and I'll cover crime, national security, or whatever. I don't watch the U.S. news. If I want accurate news, I actually watch the Greek news.
Interesting.
Yes, because I can trust that, because I know they're just going to give it to me objectively. This is what's going on in the world. This is what's going on, even what's going on in the U.S. I will hear it from a very neutral, objective standpoint. Whereas with the U.S. news, it's always skewed. And I've done CNN, I've done Fox, I've done NBC, I've done MSNBC. I've done them all. You know, I love doing the news. I love communicating information. And one of the struggles I always have is how I'm going to deliver that information. And I almost always have a producer in my ear trying to lean me always to a certain direction. I remember once there was a story. Actually, it was about, and I don't know if I've shared it, but I won't say which one. But a news network reached out to me and said, "Hey, Evie, we want to do a story on President Trump. He is charging, can you believe this, the U.S. Secret Service money to have a command post in Trump Towers. Like, how, it's taxpayer money. Like, this is horrible. His command post and these agents that are there to help him and protect him, and he's charging the U.S. Secret Service money to protect him." And I said, well, okay. I was like, I can write this article to talk about that. I said, however, I want you to know that President Clinton did the same thing. He charged the U.S. Secret Service money to set up a command post on his residence. President Biden has done the same thing. He charges the U.S. Secret Service money to have a command post at his residence, because his thing is, well, I could rent this area out of the house that you're using, so I'm going to charge you rent. So I'll write the article, and I can write it from that standpoint about how this is done. And it was, oh, no, never mind. We don't want to run that article anymore. Had I been a different person, and again, I'm Switzerland. I've learned through the U.S. Secret Service just to be Switzerland. I with politics and stuff like that. Although it's funny because you're constantly exposed to politics. But I had an agenda, I could have written that article and conveniently left out this other stuff to make President Trump appear a certain way. I'm not saying I like him or dislike him. I don't feel anything. But that's why I watch international. I watch the Greek news.
Yeah, interesting. And a lot of times, again, I'm not a lawyer, but a lot of times before a trial, when they're selecting a jury, they'll ask, well, what news networks do you listen to?
Oh, do they? I didn't know that. Of course,
yeah. So if you have someone who listens to Fox, you're like, they're going to, they're going to
lean this way, yes.
You're CNN, then it must, or MSNBC, you must be towards Biden. But again, I like to look at the data. I'm mostly at on the technical side. And typically when I give people results, I'm like, do you really want to know what's in here? Really? There are things that I will not say now, because I just don't want to cause a firestorm. But that there's things that you've seen and you've heard that you probably don't say, because it might cause issues. And there's definitely stuff I've seen. They're gray areas, and I try and do the right thing. But what is the right thing to do?
Do you mean with like protectees, people we protect?
Sure, with protectees. That have done different stuff. The service will say, well, we don't want to, push our protectees away. We want to be able to be close to them. True. But we also have an allegiance to the Constitution and to the people to really understand and provide their own objective opinion. And I think when these politicians jump into the public spot, they shouldn't just talk the talk. They got to walk the walk. And they should be held to account when certain things happen. So there was definitely challenges, at different times, and stuff that you'd see that you were just like, what is the right thing, to do here? Do Americans know everything? No. I mean, even with JFK, they didn't even unleash all of the files for that. There's a lot of stuff that's still being held back from 9/11 as well. But I think there needs to be transparency. And for some reason, they're not releasing a lot of it. So for your viewers, what do? Do they scour the internet looking for all different shreds and let me try and find out the truth? Just take a step back when you hear something, because there's been, a lot of times that I've learned is don't let emotions guide you. Take a step back and try and really, really be objective. Listen to different pieces of news, read different materials, and use multiple reliable sources to get information, and it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard to get that these days. It is extremely hard to get that, and it's only going to get harder in terms of manipulating information, what someone said, what they didn't say. They could take 15 minutes of you talking and have them replicate your voice and probably even your imagery very, very well, and probably destroy your reputation very quickly. And it's hard. I mean, so especially you're more out there, but for another person who's not much out there, they had a principal, I understand he was a principal who was fired, and he had to hire lawyers, defend himself because someone took his voice, had AI have him doing racist rants.
Stop. Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is absolutely what's going to be the future. Besides the type of cases that I mentioned, I've done child exploitation cases, probably the hardest cases I've ever done. Hardest case I've ever done. I mean, it's not to gross your listeners out, but when I say, okay, child exploitation cases, or people talking about like a 15-year-old girl or a 16-year-old girl, I had to see images of a baby getting raped. How do you go home at the end of the night and then have a straight head? That's tough.
Can I ask you a question? And this is, I'm going to be graphic, so anybody who wants to hit pause can. Just for clarity, when you say baby being raped, and I'm not new to these either. I get it. I think sometimes maybe people don't get it. Are we talking about a male doing something to female baby?
Yes, or male, both. It's both.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I mean. This is the evil that's out there. And this is, when you say electronics, remember, everything's in bits and bytes, whether it's images, whether it's videos. I was given one time from one of the agents, he was looking at, it was just a knock and talk, my understanding was, which is them just going up, interviewing. Police got the computer. He looked at it. He says, I can't find anything on here, but the police think there's just something off with this guy. He has one kid. He says he's the only, the mother's not there, that the mother left them. He says, can you look at the computer? And so I'm analyzing the computer, and I just never give up. It's weird. You almost, again, that other sense, that sixth sense, when you start looking at data, you start analyzing it, like something's just off. Something's just off here. So I start looking, I find an encrypted container that I crack. And in that container, he has videos of him raping the kid, young kid. And then they identified later that he purchased the kid on the black market. They had no idea where the kid came. This is New Jersey that this happened. You talked about the demand that I had. It was just nonstop, whether it's child exploitation cases, whether it's protective intelligence threats, monetary type of fraud. I say this all the time, whether it's law enforcement or whether it's someone in the private sector. Our most precious commodity is our time. It's the most valuable resource. You can have money, you can lose money, and get the money back again. You will never get your time back again.
Matt, so with kids, I just want to ask you this, just because you work so much of this stuff, and for people when it comes to children, what are the most important things, or if you had to kind of like tell people like, hey, these are the 3 most important things you need to be aware of when it comes to protecting your kid, what would you say those are, like, from what you've learned and what you've experienced? What makes your children the most vulnerable? And maybe it's digital. I don't know. The
most vulnerable is influence, how they're being influenced, whether it's online. I've worked, and even in the private sector, suicide cases where the mother was a therapist, well-off family, kid, I think there was like 12 different devices the kid had. The kid committed suicide, and the parents, they were involved. They were great parents. They were involved, but I think you really, really need to be involved in your kid's life.
What happened with this specific kid that led him to commit suicide?
He was being bullied. The school really didn't do enough about it. He got one other kid, I think, was expelled for something else. They blamed it on this kid. And I read the suicide letter, and I just couldn't believe what this kid killed himself for. The kids are very sensitive. I think they internalize a lot of it today, and he hung himself.
How old was he?
He was, I believe he was a freshman in college, so, 16, 17, I think, at the time. Family's devastated. It's heartbroken by it. And my initial thoughts are, how could this have been prevented? And in other cases with other kids who've committed suicide. The school they do know about this, but nothing is really done about it. They're not really taking the steps. Maybe I shouldn't say the name. I don't know if they're called DIFUS now. I've talked to other people who are in law enforcement, and they're like, oh, they're knuckleheads. I understand that they have their complexities in terms of how they can do some of these cases, and that you might have a spouse who's maybe going through a divorce who wants the kid to say that they're abused by the father, but they need to thoroughly investigate, what's going on, and there needs to be repercussions if there's evidence of that. I had a case where on the civil side where a young girl, I want to say she was 11. I forget how old she was. The mother was going through divorce. She said that the girl was being abused by the father. The father had a lot of money, went through the computers. Everything the mother said was corroborated in sense of father was sharing the computer with the daughter. There was pornography on the computer. Then there was a little bit of trace evidence of child pornography. But in addition to that, the young girl had sexually transmitted diseases. She was too young for that. So the mom's like, hey, I want to bring it to the agency. I don't want to, badmouth the agency again, but I brought it to them and I said, look, this is what's on here. Child pornography, as you know, is like the equivalent of digital cocaine. You're not supposed to have it. I said, turning this over, this is what's here. Not saying there's enough to charge him on pornography, because you would have to have a certain number of images before you can charge him. But you may want to look into this. Didn't do anything about it. Okay, and the mother actually, ironically, I think called me about a month ago, still fighting a trial. And this thing happened probably over 10 years ago. And she says, myself, my daughter, we never forgot all the work that you did. And I did that case pro bono, or pretty much pro bono. It was next to nothing, but it was a lot of work. But I think in any organization, whether you're Secret Service, whether you're FBI, whether you're, working the border, I still got, my brother who's in law enforcement. Don't expect a thank you from anyone. And it was nice. They were great. They expected thank you. Don't expect that you can only do what you're able to do. You give 100%, but there's certain people in the job that really shouldn't be there. And you'll remember, I'll probably say something that you'll probably remember. There was some of the saying for some of the agents: little cases, little problems; big cases, big problems; no cases, no problems. What are you doing in there? Don't go. Don't work there. If you're just there to pick up a check, why are you there? And this isn't just the service. People might be, oh, that's government. I see the same shit in corporate America as well. People that are in jobs, and it could be a CEO, that have no business doing there, they're not producing, or they're absolute hypocrites. They'll speak, oh, diversity, equity, inclusion. Okay, give up your job. Let's see you talk the talk. Let's see you walk the walk. Or what are you actually really doing? Let's look at the numbers in terms of what you're doing. And they're absolute hypocrites.
I think, Matt, sometimes, because I'll come across people, I think people think they work hard, like they work hard in their head. Like I do, like, because I'll see, and I'm not comparing myself to anybody, my work ethic, but I'm always like amazed when people like, they think they work hard, and then I'm just kind of like, really? Like, are you really working that, hard? And it's always something that's interesting to me, like what somebody thinks in their head versus what is really the truth. And I think sometimes in our head, we like to make ourselves more than what we are, and which is interesting because I actually do the opposite. I'm not saying I don't speak negatively to myself, but I definitely don't commend myself ever. Good job, good this. I don't do that.
I can get some corporate advice as well. When I worked in England for a little over 2 years in London, and some of the best, I remember one of the guys' names was Sean, and I said to him when I first went to the major bank, I said, "How do I stand out here? How do I really shine?" He said, "Just deliver." I said, "What do you mean, just deliver?" I said, "Of course, in the service, you don't deliver, forget it. You're ostracized. You're like, they're not squared away.
Actually, I do think the service did use shaming to some degree to get people to perform. Like, you performed because you didn't want to be shamed. You performed because you didn't want to be that guy or that girl. And I have to tell you, It works. Even when we would shoot, think about how we would shoot, right? They'd line up
Yeah.
the targets. We're what 5 feet between each other, and everybody would see each other's scores. And like even if I didn't shoot well, I'd look at the score next to me, to my left or to my right, and I'd feel like shit. And I'm like, man, I didn't perform. And now the guy to the right or left of me knows that I didn't perform. And I think maybe perhaps in this space that we've created, like, don't offend anybody, don't hurt anybody's feelings, that one of the consequences of that is that you're creating people who aren't delivering.
Absolutely. And that's what he said to me. He says, most people talk a good game. No one delivers. They're very, very good at passing the buck. And then when when you deliver excellence, all of a sudden everyone was part of it. They were all part of it. They were, you'd see me there, I was part of it. No. You were actually the blocker. I'm the type of person, like, I'll call people out. I'm like, listen, you really weren't there. But, I think we can do more, and we can achieve more in the future. And there's lessons learned. A lot of times, some people, obviously, I'm going to be, a team player to try and improve people. I think you're right. There's certain, Secret Services definitely hold people to account. I think we're, in shaming people to do better. I know the military is kind of big on this. If you're tearing someone down, you have to build them up as well. There has to be an end result. You don't just tear people down to tear them down. Some of the best bosses I had were female bosses. One, I still remember her name, Cindy Wooford. She was a great boss. She was tough. Rhonda McLean from Barclays. She was a former CISO. Rhonda McLean would tear me up in the corporate meetings, but she had an agenda. She built me up, and I delivered, and we over deliver. And maybe on a negative side is, someone said to me one time, and I think it was in the service, like, Ferrante, you can win $1 billion tomorrow and you'd complain. Yeah, I probably would, because I got to pay taxes. I'd probably sue New York, lottery. I said, of course, but I'll give you an example. If you won $1 billion tomorrow and you gave, people in your business $1 million, maybe not here, but if you're working for, a little bit larger, you're working for a large place, you give them all $1 million, they're going to still complain. Oh, well, she should have gave me 2 million. Or who does she think she is that she's given this kind of money? You're never going to satisfy everyone. But I like to, whether it's a project, a major project, whether it's on law enforcement, set clearly defined objectives. And that includes with people's career as well. And then deliver on those objectives. Set short-term goals, set long-term goals. Because, like I said, time, most precious commodity, it's going to go by extremely fast. If you're just in a place, you're not happy, you're not making a difference, then what are you doing there? What are you doing there? Even my kid, like, he's in start college. You got 4 years that you're going to be in there. And what? You're going to get a degree, that coupon. What are you doing with it? You better start thinking now. And I have a nephew who just went into the Navy. He's doing signals and cryptography. Before that, he was just doing different things. He was into the Andrew Tate type videos. So I joke around and call him Nicky Tate. And I said, what are you going to be? Well, deliver. I want to see you deliver. Don't just talk a good game. I want to see you deliver, and you need to be genuine. If not, especially in today's day and age, you're going to be called to the carpet and you're going to be torn to pieces. I think the biggest thing, it's not about what you can do for yourself. It's about what you can do for others. And in the service, one of the things that I loved doing was asset identification, asset forfeiture. People are going, listen, I got a call about, I think it was about a month ago, from a contact in Colombia. They said, somebody's coming, we got people coming to Medellin, or I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, Colombia. They're going and abusing kids, and they're going back, and we're having trouble. I said, well, if the government's not doing anything, let me know, and I'll make sure that you're being put on media and those people are shamed. I said, there can be stuff that's done about this, but not just putting people behind bars. Seize their assets, seize their money. And I loved asset identification, asset forfeiture. People hated being on night duty with me. Hated it. It was one time in the New Jersey office. I forget who was on night duty with.
Because you wanted to work, that's why.
Of course. And it'd be 2 a.m. and like we're sitting around doing nothing. It's like, Ferrante, it's a $1,500
So
eBay.
night duty is when you're on night duty, it means you're the response team. So it would be like the 1-3 precinct will call up in NYPD and be like, hey, we've got a counterfeit $10 bill. So I won't say most, but some agents would be like, I'm not getting up to go to the 1-3 precinct for a counterfeit $10 bill. And maybe somebody listening to this be like, yo, it's $10. I hear you, but you also don't know if that $10 is tied to like another 2 million bucks printed by the same guy because the serial numbers or there's a pattern or the type of paper that they use, whatever is tying it together. But yes, you're that guy that if somebody didn't want to work, like you were the worst person to work with.
Absolutely. And
I say that as a compliment.
That's fine. I mean, it is what it is. But I went there to work it. And look, I personally think you take the laziest guy, the laziest girl in the service, they still work their asses off.
That's so true.
Most people understand like, oh, government, they kind of laid around. No, we all worked. We call that other person who wouldn't go out like lazy, but they still would squeeze every drop out of them and they would produce in one form or another. Even before I went, I'll get back to the night duty, but even before I went in the service, I was working for a hedge fund company and I was making about 6 figures going back to 2000, which is a lot of money. They said, hey, do you still want to work here? You still want to come to the service? Thought about it. I said, yeah, I'll never be able to do this again. So of course, whatever, I'll take the pay cut. And general counsel calls me in from the hedge fund company like, I heard that you want to go work for the Secret Service. I had a client that was like 3 days in a basement, supposedly, allegedly. They didn't treat the person the right way, and they were very aggressive in not physically aggressive, but in the way that they got the client. Thought about like, that's why I want to work there. I mean, I want to work for an agency who's going to make a difference.
I think a lot of these agencies are struggling now, military, government agencies, because you don't go there with a dollar amount in mind. Like, I think today people are very much driven by dollar, by money. I'll tell you this, and I usually don't speak about it because I really do like to let people be, and I won't verbalize it. But one of the things that really just like, I just hate hearing is how much money somebody else makes. I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
And maybe because I grew up around it, or maybe because when I hear people talk about money, and it'll be people in a family or acquaintances, or people be like, you know how much this guy's making? It's like, I don't fucking care what he's making. Like, that's not the measurement of like what your life is. Like, I'm not knocking anybody that maybe is motivated, but when I hear dollars, like, who fucking cares? You can adjust your lifestyle to live a certain way. For example, when I was in the service, I had a teeny tiny studio apartment. I think it was 400 square feet when I lived in DC. When I first went there, I had no bed. I slept in a sleeping bag. I had no TV. One of the agents on the presence detail felt bad for me. She's like, here you go. Here's a TV. And it was like a little TV I put on the carpet on the floor. It was when I first moved to DC. So I also didn't have time. And I had like a little kitchen, and I couldn't have been happier. Like, maybe not happier, but just like fulfilled. I respect wealth and creating wealth, but I mean it from a very different standpoint. But whenever I hear like dollar and money and what this guy's making, what that guy's making, when I hear also that language with people, it's like the biggest turnoff for me. It's like, dude, I just don't care. I've never been driven by it. So I wonder sometimes too, with the way culture is going or people are going, when I think that's become a big barometer for success. And now the new big thing is, I want to be CEO. I want to be a creator. I want to make money. I want to have this car. I want to have that. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's just something I've been very disconnected from in general, and I try not to be judgmental. I really do try to be kind of like a fair and unbiased. But like, man, when I like to talk about money and wealth and that I'm motivated to create. But when I hear people like use that as the barometer for like where they need to be in life, and I'm just like, man, you like, inside me, outwardly I want to be like, you're fucking clueless, but I don't say anything.
Money's a mechanism. Money's a tool. It's what you're doing with that money. If you look at the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, before they left, this earth, what did they do? They gave a lot of their money away. They were actually in competition on who could donate the most amount of money to better society. Because at some point in their life, they realized that, what are they going to do with that money? And it was about giving the money away. So money by itself could be used for good, could be used for bad.
But I think psychologically, it's a status thing in people's head. Like, I'm somebody because I have this wealth. And if I don't have this wealth, like, what am I?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to get a Porsche. I had a dream of getting a Porsche, and I got to test drive a Porsche, and I was just like, "That's it." I'm like, "No, I don't see the money. I don't see the value, that's in this vehicle. Nice car, but it just wasn't worth it." Eventually, I got beautiful. It was a BMW M4 convertible, hooked up. It was nice. I don't have it anymore. I have my. I'm happy with my electric vehicle. I don't remember those things. You know what I remember? The kids that I've helped out. I remember the interns who would come and they wanted to better their career, and now they're doing great in their career. That's the stuff that I'm going to remember because you're not taking it with you. And a lot of those people who are just out for how much money they have, I think they're hollow. I think the money, like I said, can come and go, and they can't deal with it when the money's gone. Been on the poor side. I was doing paper routes when we physically delivered papers. Do I like having money in my pocket? Yes. People they might ask me where my politics lie. Well, I like to be liberal, but liberal not with other people's money, with my money. You have to have money in your pocket sometimes to give money away. But the people, I hear what you're saying. There's definitely the people who just want the wealth for their own status
I think
symbol.
maybe
and that to me shows that they're hollow inside.
I don't know if they're hollow because I see good people chase this. Good people where I'm just like.
But they're chasing the wrong thing. They're
Yes.
chasing the wrong thing. And what's going to happen, and you know this, I've been around, you've been around a lot of wealthy people.
But I think maybe that's why,
especially
'cause
being on Clinton's detail, I've been around a lot of super wealthy people.
Oh, yeah.
Civil side, super wealthy people. And I've seen them very unhappy. I'll give you, here's a good example. The kid that committed suicide. Think they want their money, or you think they want their kid back? Their kid, right? They want their kid back who committed suicide. And no money in the world is going to bring that back. I lost my dad 2 years ago. I was able to build up a business and continued to show revenue growth, but I was able to stay along my father's side, who was suffering from vascular dementia. And I stood by his side, working by his side, day in, pretty much day in, day out, by his side. I don't regret that at all. Could I have maybe worked, and made quadruple what I've made? Absolutely. Would I have been happier? No, I was able to spend those days with my father. Money comes and goes. Friends, people have this, the other thing you talk about money, but people also have a false expectations in terms of friends, in terms of who they can rely on. People who say that they have a lot of friends, I don't believe that. I always go with the saying, friendship is like the light of phosphorus, seen plainest when all around it is dark. So when you don't have that money, are those people still there? What is your sign of wealth? How do you define wealth? And if it's just a number that's in the bank account, you're not going to be happy. I know a lot of people who died, big numbers in the bank account. It means nothing today. Maybe their family's a mess because it's not about the money. They wish they had their father or their mother back. They wish they could have spent more time as a family. I tell my kids every day, I love them. They say the same thing back to me. It's not contrived. When I go away, one of the things that I've learned from the service and doing so much travel is I take my kids with me. They've been to Dubai, they've been to Oman, they've been to Europe, they've been to South America. They're with me. I want them to see how the rest of the world is. And my love for this country has only grown with international travel. Do I respect other countries? I respect other countries as well. I'm not the ugly American who goes overseas and says, hey, this is the way it should be. Once you leave the borders here, so do the U.S. laws, so does the Constitution. You're working in that other country, and you need to respect their laws in their country as well. You're there and you're being protected because someone is willing to do violence on your behalf to protect you being there. And I've seen stupid stuff by whether it's American and as well as European and other travelers when they go abroad where they're not respected. And we need to ensure that respect stays in place for Americans in this country as well as abroad. Otherwise, we're going to be disrespected by our enemies.
Let me ask you a question, Matt. So if someone like myself or somebody else is like, because my information's out there, and one of the things is like, can a person come to you like myself and say, hey, listen, I want you to do an assessment of me and then guide me on how to better secure my data and my information? If people wanted to do that, could they do that?
Yeah, so we have a platform coming out that does that enforces data privacy management. So look for that soon. That's coming out in Q3 or Q4. And that was based on a project they did at MIT. And this is done at, a much larger scale, simplicity and enforcement of that. So the short answer is yes. A lot of times we get clients who come where unfortunately someone passed and they say, we have no idea where the data is. We want to get pictures back. We have no idea if there's financial accounts or we're locked out of the system. How do we get into it? And we can actually provide digital legacy portfolio of all the accounts, all the passwords, and then be able to, the family can make decisions on what they want to do with that data.
So Matt, where can people find you?
Our website is citinex.com. We have two sides of the business. One is a consulting side, everything from tech and innovation, cybersecurity, as well as digital forensics. And then on the other side of the business, we do multi-sided platform design or platform design, dealing with AI, blockchain technologies, Web3 technologies. So the best thing to do is check it out. Users come, I make sure that I provide them with a discount as well. And a portion of the proceeds will be going to donated to the U.S. Secret Service. I know there's a fund set up for 9/11 survivors, as well as potential victims. Hopefully not, but potential victims to come in the future where the country may suffer impacts while people are performing their duties.
And with that, Matthew Ferrante, thank you.
Thank you.
Stormy loves AI, and I'm kind of like,
It's coming.
I don't trust
Got to embrace it. You have to embrace it.
I'm trying to learn.
But we'll probably become obsolete too soon. I wonder how they're going to do the currency.
Well, they're saying people's best friends are going to be AI as well.
You're going to start, people are going to start dating AI.
They're already doing that in Japan. They have virtual dates with virtual AI people.
I heard, that
She's the CEO's a female.
she spoke. She's like, your virtual AI is going to date this person's virtual AI. If they get along, then the real people can meet and get along. I bet people are going to actually they're going to stop dating people, and it's going to turn to, I'm going to date my AI and have a relationship with AI because I'm going to design my AI to be what I want it to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because humans are lazy, so I feel like, am I going to find a...
No, I'm going to create my own human being. Do you disagree that that's going to happen?
No, it's going to happen.
Right?
It's going to happen.
People are going to be living in a whole virtual reality, literally, and so, which we already sort of do.
What happens to babies?
Well, there's a problem
but
with
not
that.
everybody wants babies.
We aren't going to because they're too much work.
Well, Japan right now sells more diapers for adults than they do for children.
That's right.
And there's going to be a population crash, like places like China, because they had the one-child policy. It's too late. It's too late.
Damage has already been done. You worked stuff for Bin Laden's case as well.
I did, yeah. So, some of that I can't talk about, but